you. I've been trying.
There you go. Am I good to go, Doug?
You are good to go. It's not so much. Oh, go ahead.
In all seriousness, I have a question for the city.
meeting for Monday, July 20th, 2020 to order. At this time, we'll take a silent moment of personal reflection. As a reminder, all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest as per section 133 of the Lloydminster Charter regarding any item on this agenda. Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be declaring for 7.1 as well as 9.2.
9.2, all right. Bear with me a second. Okay. Any others noted? All right, moving on to, I will ask if there's any additions or deletions to this agenda. Not seeing any, I'll move to item number 3 and I'll look to council for direction on the approval of the agenda as presented. Councillor Buckingham.
I move that the agenda dated July 20th, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Fagman, thank you very much. Any further discussion on the question? Not seeing any, all please raise your hand for all in favor, please.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed, carried. Moving on to item number 4, I'll look for direction on both 4.1 and then followed by 4.2 for the approval of the previous meeting minutes. Councillor Buckingham.
I move that the regular council meeting minutes dated June 22nd, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Monroe, thank you very much. Any discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any, all in favor, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship.
I'll look to council again. Councillor Buckingham.
I move that the special council meeting minutes dated July 7th, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Baker, thank you very much. Any further discussion on those before I call for the question? Not seeing any, all in favor.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed, carried. Thank you very much, council. Moving on to item number 5, business arising from the minutes. None noted. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 6. I believe we have a public presentation. City Clerk, if you would please invite that individual in.
He should be in the room. I just haven't seen his camera come up.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
Mr.
We can hear you.
There we go. I'm on.
All right. Welcome, Mr. Sprenrath. You have 5 minutes to make a presentation to council.
Okay, I won't take too much time. All I'm doing is just basically following up the letter that I sent in our previous discussions. I won't bore you with rereading all the details. I don't think that's probably necessary, but I had sent a letter that was part of your information package. And basically it's more a matter of just making myself available to answer any other questions or to deal with any concerns that you might, council might have with respect to the DC1 site approval for 4910 36th Street.
Your Worship, if I may,
Yes.
that may be seen as inappropriate. Council questioned that at the point at the public hearing. Perhaps if Mr. Sprenrath does not have a further presentation to council that they can ask questions of. That's what they should be asking questions of, is the presentation today.
The presentation today. Thank you, City Clerk. Any questions from the information provided by Mr. Sprenrath in his letter that was received by council? Councillor Baker.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. The only one concern I have is the 36th Street, to make sure that parking doesn't become an issue on 36th Street. And it might be appropriate if in fact this is approved, that you work out some kind of agreement between the Mr. Spenrath and the city about a no parking zone or something along there, because I went by there on Friday and it's just a congested area, especially if you're on 36th Street, with the exit to the south to that 7-Eleven mall and the intersection on 17, the short block to 49th. It looked really congested to me, and traffic piles up there, and the right-hand lane becomes a right-hand turn lane to go north, probably sooner than it really has to, but it does. So maybe that's not something that just should be considered. Not necessarily whether it makes or breaks the deal, but I think that should be checked out by transportation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Would I be able to comment on that?
City Clerk, is that responsibility of, or would it be referred to the city to administration for? You're not on, City Clerk.
If there's a question of Mr. Spenrath in there, yes, he would comment, but if there's no question, then it's a statement by a councillor.
Was it a question as to how we would address that?
Well, my question was, really, it's a point, Your Worship, and through to our good city clerk. I don't know how well we looked at the traffic. I know that you've commented on it, Mr. Spenrath, but I'd like to know what engineer and our transportation department thinks we should do about the parking in front, if anything. If you call that a question, fine, but that's still an issue with me.
Yeah,
So
I think
I'll let the city clerk make the decision what kind of a question I'm asking.
I think that's a, go ahead, City Clerk, but I think I know where from that perspective.
To the chair.
Well, I believe, Councillor Baker, that will be a question to be put to engineering if and when the application, so there's still a development permit. So I guess that would be the question that would be referred to administration for the development permit. Am I correct on that, City Clerk, and the process this is going through?
It would be administration that would deal with that issue.
When the development.
That's fine with me, as long as we do something and look at it and make a decision one way or the other.
And I
think it's critical.
And we have indicated in our previous documentation and in the July 17th email that we are going to discourage parking along 36th Street by moving the entrance to the south side, which is on the west side. Plus, we're going to put some signage on our property as well to avoid people parking there and to direct them to the door on the west side.
Thank you, Mr. Spenrath. Councillor Baker.
Your Worship, I understand Mr. Spenrath's letter. I just want to know what our transportation department's thinking, because I think it's congested.
Yeah.
I know what Mr. Spenrath wants to do with his building. It's just, is that going to become an issue with the city if we don't deal with it?
If I may, Your Worship, that item is up later in the agenda, and the councillor could ask that of administration at that time.
Yeah,
I missed something then.
No, so basically you're on the right track, Councillor Baker, just timing. So at I believe at 9.2, this is when, is that when this is, no, sorry, not 9.2. It is coming back to council later on, City Clerk, as you referred, today or?
Yes. At 8.5.1, I believe, Your Worship.
Okay, yeah.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Buckingham, did I notice your hand up?
Yeah, but I was going to rephrase Councillor Baker's comments to a question for Mr. Spenrath, and he answered it already, so I'm good.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Spenrath from his presentation? Thank you very much, Mr. Spenrath, for your comments and your letter and for attending today.
Thank you very much, Council and Your Worship.
Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item number 7, which is a public hearing scheduled for 2 o'clock. So we will move past item 7 at this time, and we'll return to it at the 2 o'clock hour. I would ask, move to item number 8, 8.1 to the city manager.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. So I will be presenting the 8.1.1, the Annexation Transition Plan. I've also got Sam from planning as well on board if there's any detailed questions that may arise. So the recommendation today is that Council approve the draft Annexation Transition Plan and direct administration to add the document to the City of Lloydminster's proposed annexation application package to the Municipal Government Board, or the MGB. The purpose of the plan is to show the Municipal Government Board that the necessary education materials required by landowners in the proposed annexation area have been prepared and circulated in advance of the annexation of lands as identified in Schedule B. Additionally, the document would be used for reference materials by landowners to obtain information on the services provided by the City of Lloydminster as their lands become part of the city upon annexation. So the background information is there. We are looking to applying to annex 23.5 quarter sections of land for the County of Vermilion River. Part of the requirements of the annexation in the province of Alberta is the preparation of annexation transition plan. What services are provided to be annexed and how the services provided by the city would be different or similar to those provided by the county. This information is intended to assist affected landowners prepare for possible changes to the types and levels of service that they currently experience. The plan is divided into 4 major areas of service and governance. It includes governance, city services, property and utilities, and licenses, permits, and taxes. So I guess today we're just looking for direction. At the end of the day, not a requirement for council approval, but the intention here is that when we get into the discussions at the MGB level, that council is not is informed of the proposals being forwarded to the MGB and would be I guess part of the application package going forward. So many of the discussions previously had with the INAC committee at the county were included discussions on the annexation transition plan, but a lot of those discussions are held without prejudice. Therefore, this is strictly a city document moving forward, and so thus the need to have it approved here. So I look forward. I guess I'll turn it back to you, Your Worship, for any questions or comments from council.
Thank you, City Manager. Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the negotiations, while they were ongoing with the county, we would have prepared an annexation transition plan similar to this. And I know a lot of what is said in there is without prejudice and kind of in camera. So it's not necessarily for everyone's ears what's discussed at that table. But just generally, is this transition plan significantly different from what the county was and the city had more or less agreed to without prejudice at the time?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I would agree with your statement that it's very similar. There's a few of the details in terms of joining roads, as an example, that may have not have been finalized in terms of who would take care of them as a for maintenance and ongoing maintenance throughout the year, whether it's snow removal, different things like that. So some of those were in the final stages, but I would say a good chunk of the document was discussed with the county prior to those discussions finishing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? You did take my question, Councillor Torsten. That was exactly for everybody's, from that perspective, that was not part of those discussions and where things are from that perspective. But I appreciate, City Manager, you've clarified this was not just a city document. It was a document that in the basic format had been in full discussion with the county. Councillor Monroe.
Sorry, Your Worship. Michael, Councilor Diachuk, it says that he was removed from the Zoom and he can't get back in. I'm sorry to interrupt, but he wants to be here, but he can't access. So can we pause for a moment?
We certainly can. I just sent the city clerk a note here.
Oh, okay.
I had received the same comments, so thank you. Yeah. So we'll get him back in here for whatever reason happened.
My apologies. He's just on that committee, so he may have comments that are of...
Absolutely. Nope. Thank you very much, Councillor.
I will work on correcting that if I could just have one moment, Council.
Certainly. Technology is a wonderful thing when everything is fully working.
I just sent him another invite and hopefully that'll work, Your Worship.
Thank you, City Clerk.
Just when reviewing this document, Dion, is it possible, so just for anyone that doesn't really know exactly how annexation works, when this document is proposed to the MGB, they have the ability to change anything, even if it's not what our proposed direction is that correct?
That's correct. The terms are negotiable. That's a good point, Councillor, and they are negotiable items that could be not agreed upon by the county, and maybe it's something that could be negotiable as the process moves on.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add to that.
Person, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. When he says that, it's not even just the land requirements either. It's anything within that transition plan and who's doing what for a foreseeable time. They can provide direction as to who's doing what for what time period or what triggering event changes that from happening. So that's not unheard of for the MGB to make those decisions if you don't have a plan sent to them or an agreement sent to them.
Right. I think it's important for our residents in the community to know that as well, right? Because they may read this plan and think something else may come out once it's done with the MGB, and they may understand that, oh, this was the proposal that was put in. How is it different? But at least if they know that they are the governing body and they have the last say on how things will be directed.
I would also add to that the team has looked at past practices of previous decisions made by the MGB too, as in some of the areas that may be contentious or highlights for current property owners that we've looked at previous decisions made by the MGB and used a lot of some of those items to reflect what's in our document.
Thank you, City Clerk. Our City Manager, City Clerk, how are we making out with Councillor Diachuk?
I can't re-enter the meeting for some reason. I'm going to have to just get up and pause and go check with our IT to see if there's an issue here that I can't resolve. Maybe they can help me with.
Okay.
If that's okay with Council.
We'll take a very short pause. I don't think we need a motion for that, but give the City Clerk a moment or two with the IT department to see if we can get Councillor Diachuk reestablished his link. Councillor Baker.
Just a question I had, Your Worship. When is the end date? Like, what institutes the end date? Like, when does that happen? Like, what has to be done to say, all right, that's all belongs to the city, or that all belongs to the county, and that's the end date? How does that happen?
I'll take a kick at the cat. If, from what I understand, is that once the MGB board has made their final decision, they will set a date, and that would be effective at that date. If I'm correct, City Manager, on that, I understand.
Yeah, there's a couple of terms in there, or a couple of the items in there, like taxes as an example. If the I don't have the clause right in front of me, but there's a couple of clauses. I'll use taxes as an example where they can of the tax rates of the municipalities for the period. Some do it for 5 years, some do it for 10 years, some do it for the entire growth study, the length of the growth study, which in this case is 2051. So that's probably the most contentious, Councillor Baker, one that we talk about. In our case, our for farmland, as an example, our tax rate is lower than the counties, so they would, if it's not an issue, they would probably go on our tax rate anyway, until certain times where they might, or there's some triggers there, such as development, subdivision, different things like that, that would trigger a change in assessment as well as a change in potential tax rates.
But there is, all right, 5 years from today, I'm done. If there's no change.
That's part of the final document that we'll have to put some timelines. I was inquiring into some of those on Friday, as late as Friday. Okay. And so that's one of the things that will have to be negotiated with the County of Vermilion River.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess I ask because sometimes this stuff drags on forever.
Yeah.
And never gets.
Just as an update, Your Worship, we have IT sitting next to me, and they're working to solve that problem right now.
All right. Thank you, City Clerk, for that update. So, City Manager, just for everybody that might be listening, farming operations will continue on the land that's currently being farmed, that's being proposed for annexation. That wouldn't change until there was a development permit. It would be considered farmland until there's a development permit. Is that basically the process?
Yeah, or there's a change. There's a few different things that change the scope of it. But yeah, that's essentially correct. Whether it's a subdivision, zoning change, those are probably the two biggest examples. I believe services comes into play a little bit on depending on the type of development again, but zoning and subdivision are probably the key ones.
Okay, thank you.
And if you want, so I can put them on speakerphone here, and then you can. Worship.
Yes, City Clerk.
Councillor Diachuk, and he'll be able to join by audio at this time.
Still working through the kinks on the video.
Just working through the kinks.
All right. Councillor Diachuk, are you there?
I am here.
Terrific. Did you have any questions or comments further to what's been discussed?
No, I'm good, thanks.
All right. Any further questions or comments for the City Manager? Not seeing any. I'll look for Council's direction on 8.1.1 Annexation Transition Plan. Councillor Fagnan.
I move that Council approve the draft annexation transition plan and direct administration to add the document to the City of Lloydminster's proposed annexation application package to the Municipal Government Board.
Thank you, Councillor. Looking for a seconder, Councillor Torson. Thank you. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Favor.
And Councillor Diachuk, thank you. Opposed, carried. Moving on to,
If I could, if we could take a 5-minute recess, I think we're gonna have to reboot some systems, Your Worship, if we could do that. My apologies.
all right. I'll look for a motion to take a 5-minute recess. Councillor Buckingham, seconded by Councillor Fagman. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we'll reconvene at 2 o'clock for the public hearing, hopefully. All right, so I require a motion to come back into, or do I need a motion, City Clerk? Can I reconvene? Oh, lost your, I got you on mute again, City Clerk.
Yes, your worship, you need to come in out of recess.
Okay, motion, Councillor Monroe to come out of recess, seconded by Councillor Buckingham. All in favor?
Thank you, worship.
Opposed? Carried. All right, returning to agenda item number 7, the public hearing that was scheduled for 2 o'clock. It is now, I've got 2:02 on my clock. We have bylaw 21-2020, the proposed land use bylaw amendment. I would like to,
I will declare at this point.
thank you, Councillor Buckingham. I would like to note before we begin that during a public hearing, we ask that you respect the views of everyone here and allow each person their time to speak without interruption. Each person wishing to speak has up to 5 minutes to make a presentation to council. If you do wish to speak, please state your name for the record and whether you are in support of or opposed to the proposed bylaw. When you are finished speaking, please remain at the front as council may wish to ask you questions. All discussions of council members, city staff, and delegations shall be directed to the chairperson. Any questions brought forward by the public which are not able to be addressed during this meeting will be done so at the next council meeting. Council will not debate this matter during this hearing, and the decision regarding whether or not to grant the bylaw further readings will be dealt with following the public hearing. I declare the public hearing for bylaw 21-2020, the land use bylaw amendment, opened at 2:03 p.m. I would ask the city clerk to confirm whether or not this public hearing has been advertised in accordance with the applicable legislation and to summarize the purpose of this hearing.
I confirm that this public hearing has been advertised and notice has been provided in accordance with the applicable legislation. This public hearing was advertised in the Meridian Source on May 28th, June 4th, and June 11th, 2020. The purpose of this public hearing is for bylaw 21-2020, being a proposed amendment to the land use bylaw to include provisions for roof signs.
I will now call upon anyone wishing to speak who is opposed to the proposed bylaw. Is there anyone indicated, City Clerk?
There is one, your worship.
I will now ask if anyone wishes to speak in favor of the proposed bylaw. Again, City Clerk, I'll refer to.
And we have nobody who wishes to speak in favor.
All right. I will now call on anyone else who is affected by the proposed bylaw that wishes to speak. City Clerk, was there any outside parties or interested parties at all?
No, there was not, your worship.
As no member of the public was in attendance to speak on the matter, I declare the public hearing for bylaw 21-2020 closed at 2:05 p.m.
Thank you, worship. And just to confirm, Councillor Diachuk, you understood the public hearing?
Yes, I heard it.
Thank you, Councillor Diachuk.
All right, I'll just invite Councillor Buckingham back in. Okay. Councillor Buckingham's here. Great. All right, moving on to agenda 8.2, the office of the city clerk, and it's an 8.2.1. I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, your worship. To present 8.2.1, appeal on public safety order, I'll ask the city clerk, Doug Rodwell, to present.
Thank you, your worship and council. The item before us is an appeal of a public order issue under section 503 of the Lloydminster Charter. And the recommendation will be slightly different than the recommendation in the package. The recommendation will be the council vary order 201115, issued on the property located at lot 13, block 32, plan 7822724, to provide a revised date of August 4th, 2020 to comply with the order. The background is on June 3rd, 2020, the city of Lloydminster issued an order pursuant to the Lloydminster Charter in contravention of the Community Standards Bylaw 10-2018. The order required the landowner to complete the following by June 26, 2020. remove all garbage, debris, scrap metals, dilapidated furniture and refuge, cut and maintain grass, shrubs, trees at acceptable standard, and must maintain the property thereafter. The resident has filed an appeal and is requesting that council perform a review of the order. File a review of the order, attaches the additional information to that order. From administration, the appeal order to clean up. On May 26, 2020, Lloydminster Public Safety received a complaint regarding the condition of the property at Lot 13, Block 32, Plan 7822724. A community peace officer attended the property that day. When viewed from the street and adjacent properties, it was observed that the condition of the lot was not in compliance with the community standards bylaw. The concerns centered primarily around failing to cut grass and vegetation, an accumulation of garbage, debris, and refuge and dilapidated furniture. The attending officer met with the occupant of the residence and explained the concerns, and a warning notice was provided indicating the remedial action that would need to be taken. The owner was provided 1 week to clean the property. The officer returned 1 week later, June 3rd, 2020, to inspect the property, and minimal change was evidenced upon the recheck. A review of the property history with the Public Safety Department revealed similar complaints in 2014, 2017, and 2018. Each time the property had been cleaned to an acceptable standard when advised of the concern. On June 3rd, 2020, based on the minimal progress to remedy the situation by the property owner, the investigating officer prepared a cleanup order as provided for in the Lloydminster Charter. The order required the compliance by June 26, 2020. This document was signed by the Senior Manager of Public Safety after reviewing the file's context and was mailed to the property owner. On June 19, 2020, the Public Safety Department was advised of an appeal to the order. The file process is being held in abeyance until the decision is reached by council after the hearing is afforded to the property owner. I can report the current situation today is an officer revisited the property and from the public area and adjacent residents indicated that the front area of the property had been appropriately cleaned. However, the backyard still required work. The property owner, the appellant, has provided the following document. Please excuse my absence from this meeting. I was originally given the wrong date for this review and made commitment to provide overtime coverage for my employee in the meantime. I have a few reasons to request a review of this order. The Officer Lorenz is a peace officer and is required to obtain a warrant to enter my property. Even if he was a bylaw officer, he would then be required to give me a reasonable notice before entering my property to do an investigation. I was given essentially no time to comply with this warning. He presented me with a warning on May 26 and told me that I had until June 3rd to show some progress with compliance. Since the price of oil crashed, my employer has closed operations in the city and I have been commuting to work for 4.5 years. My work schedule required me to be in Fort McMurray from May 27th to June 3rd inclusive. When I tried to explain this to him, he made up his mind and refused to actually give me any time. The order itself is vague. What is the acceptable standard and where do I find a copy of these standards? There is no scrap metal in any of the pictures. The furniture pictured is from my use and my use of my guests. The bathtub was not inside because my wife is suffering from injuries and I had no one to help me move it. I ended up moving it on my own on the 3rd of July, but I noticed Officer Lawrence failed to take any pictures of my driveway when he came back. I was already working towards what I believed what was the order intended, but just not at that speed the Officer Lawrence wanted. In the picture, as you can see, I had landscape fabric bags, mulch of grass, seed, and the trees were cut down was the cause of most of the overgrowth. And you can also see that large amount that was removed from my private backyard. I'm doing my best to get caught up, but things like this only cause further delays. It has already caused me to delay in having my front yard completed and resulted in a loss of approximately $100 in bedding plants, which are no longer available. The appellant further requests that the order be canceled, as he does not want the order to show up for his property in the future. And I stand by for any questions from council on this matter.
Thank you, City Clerk. Questions or comments from council? City Clerk, in the presentation by the appellant, he stated that the peace officer, Officer Lorenz, is required to obtain a warrant to enter his property. And there is pictures of the property. Can you provide some clarification of what's transpired?
Yes, I can, Your Worship. Section 500 Lloydminster Charter allows an officer to enter a property when given as long as he gives reasonable notice. In this case, the officer did not require to enter the property. He took it from the public sidewalk and from adjacent properties.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I just had a question. So there seems to be a decent amount of variance, at least on the dates between the letter received and what's actually in the notice. Which led to some of my confusion because according to the order, it was from the dates of, or it was to the date of June 26th. But the letter says that they only had till the 2nd or the 3rd to be able to clean it up. Is that correct, or am I missing something?
I believe the date to clean it was by the 3rd.
Okay.
1 week to clean the property. In this case, our officers would normally meet with the individual, and as long as they had a plan to move forward or were making progress on it, they would abate that date and provide a secondary date. In this case, I do note from the officer this morning that the front yard has been cleaned to an acceptable standard, but there is still work required in the backyard.
Okay. Yeah, it was just because, like, when I'm talking about the dates, I'm sure I saw it where it said you must comply with this order before June 26th, 2020. Is that not the deadline? That's on page, because that was sent on June 3rd. I guess maybe I just don't fully understand the process. Page 82.
Okay. So if I can, I believe there was a warning notice given dated June 3rd. And the actual order, I think you're on the right track, Councilor Torson, that had to be completed by, correct me if I'm wrong, City Clerk, 26th of June. You're muted again, City Clerk.
Fortunately, we're having some difficulties with the technical issue. I keep getting muted. The warning provided him some time to clean the property. The order gave him till the 26th to comply, pursuant to the Section 503 order.
Okay, and then it was after the 26th that it didn't actually occur, like the cleanup didn't happen until after that point.
That's correct. And the order, once you filed an appeal under 506, the order was held in abeyance until council made a decision.
Okay.
City Clerk, you also mentioned that the appellant was concerned about the order. Once the order is met, it's removed, correct? There's nothing that remains on title or anything like that on the property. It just, once the order is completed, it's null and void. Is that the right terminology?
Yeah, once the order is completed, then the order would remain in the peace officer files. However, there would be no further action taken on the order. If the city had to take action on the property, then the city would take action. Such action if the cost of the remuneration or the cost of the property cleanup wasn't taken care of, it would be placed on taxes and collected likewise.
So there would be some follow-up communication, no matter what the council decides with the appellant, so that he's crystal clear onto what is required to meet the standards. Because I kind of sense that in his letter here, that he's feeling unclear as to what is required to be done.
I think that the officer has communicated that with him, but yes, the city would re-communicate what the requirements would be.
Okay. Any other, Councillor Buckingham?
Thank you, Worship. Just through to the city clerk. Just to be clear on what your amended request of council is now, because I'm okay personally if we've got a different date, which is what I understood you to say, to give the appealant a little more time to do it. Is that what your amended request is today?
That's correct, Councillor. After I met with the officer this morning, it was clear that they had made some progress on the property, still had some work to do. And as such, that's why we decided on the 4th date. That would give him time to do it. The main public area has been cleaned. So we're hoping that he'll work towards finishing the back area by the 4th, taking into account his work schedule.
Good, thank you.
See, Councillor Diachuk has joined us. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Worship. Through to our city clerk. Mr. City Clerk, there's no fine levied, right?
I have not seen that we've levied a fine at this point.
There's no fine. So we're just asking him to clean up his lot.
That's correct. The normal practice is that if they have to order a cleanup crew to go in, then they issue the fine. But
okay.
At this, I'm not aware of fines.
But no fine. He was just asked to clean up his lot.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other? Councillor Monroe.
Sure. So I just want to make a comment. I think that it's imperative that we emphasize, that the city is always willing to work with individuals, no matter what their circumstances are, whether that's their water bills or their taxes, or for this instance, this cleanup notice. So, we are willing to work. And I think that that's important for our residents to realize that, if you communicate with us, you explain to us and I don't know what the direction will be today, but if you explain to us your circumstance, and there is extenuating circumstances, this individual was out of town, his wife is injured, and I'm not saying that that's an excuse on why things aren't upkept, because there are also other people that are in the same situation. But it's funny, because before I looked at these pictures, I actually thought that this was going to be a different house that I've drove by numerous times that's particularly in this same situation. So I just feel that it's important to note that, if there are residents out there that are in these same circumstances, that they have the ability to approach the city if they are having any hardships, and hopefully there would be the ability to at least hear you out and hear what your side of the story is as well. So I think that's imperative that our communication is there as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fagnan.
I apologize. I lost signal there. I just wanted to note one thing, that there is a history. I agree that we need to work with our residents, but with the similar complaints in 2014, 17, and 18. So this is not new to that particular residence. So I find that rather interesting as well. Thank you.
Good point, Councillor. Any further discussion? Before I look for direction from council, I'll ask the city clerk to just read over what was the proposed option that administration, their first proposed option.
So very clearly, council has 3 options here. It can confirm the order, it can vary the order, or it may cancel the order. The recommendation that administration is putting forward at this time is the council vary order 201115 issued to the property located at lot 13, block 32, plan 7822724 to provide a revised date of August 4th, 2020 to comply with the order.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. All right. I'll look for direction from City and Council. Councilor Monroe.
Sorry, I just have one further question. So, obviously we have worked with this individual and we've been very cooperative. What happens, City Clerk, if by August 4th, then, we've given a lot of extensions on this? What is the repercussion if by August 4th the individual hasn't done what they're supposed to be doing?
Well, I can only suggest that he'd likely receive a fine. The city would make arrangements to have the property clean. Such costs of the arrangements would be borne by the property owner. Failure to pay those would be then placed on the taxes. Failure to pay for the cost of the taxes then would result in tax action on the property.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I just, although you're willing to work in a certain situation, there has to be some sort of hard deadline that, we're not going to keep on giving these extensions as well. So thanks very much.
All right, I'll look if any further questions or comments. Not seeing any, I'll look for direction from council on 8.2.1. Councilor Torres.
Sure. Sorry, just 1 second. It's kind of loud in here. Harry, good. We're good. I move that council vary order number 20-1115 issued to property located at lot 13, block 32, plan 7822724, to amend the date to August 4th, 2020. I don't know if I got the exact wording.
If I may, to provide a revised date of August 4th, 2020 to comply with the order.
Okay. Would you like me to read that again?
You're close enough, I think. I think that we understood what your intention, and I think the city clerk just clarified the tail ending there. So if that works for the city clerk, I think that the intention was there.
I think the intent of the motion is very clear. Thank you.
I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Baker, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion to the motion that's at foot or at hand right now? Not seeing any, I'll please raise your hand in favor.
Thank you, Worship.
Opposed, carried. It's good to see you, Councillor Diachuk. Glad that you're back with us. We've got you on mute so far, but that's all right. I'm sure we'll
glad to be back. I just normally have the agenda up on another screen, so I don't have motions in front of me or anything. So. Okay.
We can see if we can get you a paper copy very quickly. All right, moving on to 8.2.2, back to the city clerk via the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. The item before us is a recommendation that the council approve the following regarding the 2020 municipal election. That the names of the candidates be listed on the ballot alphabetically by surname, and then, if necessary, by given name. That the rates for remuneration for the election officials are as follows: supervising deputy returning officer, $325 a day; issuing deputy returning officer, $250 a day; receiving deputy returning officer, $250 a day; poll clerk, $185 a day; training session, $40 a session; advance poll to be paid in the same rate as regular polls shown above. The issue is to provide council with the 2020 municipal election matters for decision. The next municipal election will be held on Monday, November 9th, 2020, with the candidate nomination packages now posted on the city's webpage and available at City Hall. All elections within the city of Lloydminster follow the Local Government Election Act 2015, Saskatchewan. Bylaw number 20-2020 provides authority for the use of voting machines, mail-in ballots, and the provision of advanced mobile and special polls for elections or by-elections to be conducted. Arrangement of names on the ballot. The Act provides for the arrangements of names on the ballot to be listed alphabetically, and it is recommended to continue this process. Rates of pay for election officials. An election coordinator will not be utilized for this election. The staff from the office of the city clerk will undertake the duties of running the election. Administration is proposing a slight increase in the election officials' rates implemented in the 2016. From 2016, the polls will be open from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. on election day, and the election workers are required to be in attendance for the duration. Once the poll closes, the election staff will complete the vote counting, reconcile, and reporting the results in a 12 to 13 hour day for election workers when they cannot leave their polling location for any reason. Below is a listing of the 2016 rates as well as the 2020 proposed rates. Administration plans to advertise for the above positions in August, with training to occur after the positions have been filled. The options are the council approve the following regarding the 2020 municipal election, which sets the names to candidates be alphabetically by surname, the rates for the election workers, or council not approve, or council ask for more information. This item is alignment with the strategic plan in legislative compliance. The City of Lloydminster is legislated to hold a municipal election on November 9th, 2020. Government implications in Section 52 of the Local Government Elections Act, 2015, Saskatchewan, requires that council sets remuneration to be paid for the election officials. I will also note that the election bylaw must be passed 90 days prior to an election. So if council does not pass it today, it'll require a special meeting to do so. Budget financial implications, $60,000 is in the operational budget to cover the cost of the election. And I'll turn it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, City Clerk. Questions or comments for the City Clerk or administration as a whole? Councilor Baker.
I'm sorry, were you asking the question of Your Worship?
No, I'm just the questions and comments right now. I haven't called the question yet.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Datchuk.
Thanks, Your Worship. Are these rates consistent with the years prior? I remember I read this here a couple days ago now, and I can't remember.
The supervising deputy returning officer, because of the size of some of our polls, would be a new position. So it wasn't previously done in 2016, and we're planning at $325 a day. The issue deputy returning officer was $230 a day in 2016, and we're proposing $250 a day. The receiving deputy officer, returning officer was $230, and we're proposing $250. The poll clerk was $170, and we're proposing $185. The training session was $35 a person, and we're proposing $40 a person. And the advanced poll was $15 per hour, or the same as indicated. And we're proposing same as indicated by the position above.
Okay, I guess as a follow-up, I'm just wondering, given the proximity of the provincial elections, are we going to be struggling to find people at all for these roles?
My hope would be no. We have a core group of individuals in the city who quite enjoy working municipal elections and have done so for a very long time, and we're hopeful and dependent upon them. Of course, we do share workers with the provincial elections, so that may be an issue. Coronavirus, depending on how that sits, some of our workers are seniors, so there might be some concerns as well. So we'll have to wait and see after the post goes out to see what the response is, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Monroe.
Sure. Just to the city clerk, I know that you had talked previously regarding COVID and what have you, that there may be additional advanced poll dates. With having these, I guess, remunerations in place, if we even were to include substantial further advanced poll dates, this would still be within our budgetary allotment?
We are comfortable that we're within our budgetary allotment, and we're comfortable at this point in time, depending, of course, on what restriction COVID would put on us, that the budget would be sufficient to meet the election.
Okay.
Councillor Baker.
Your Worship, first of all, I'd like to commend the addition of mail-in ballots. That's something that people have been asking for many, many, many years. We have a lot of residents that take off for the winter, maybe not this year, but for the most part. And they get really upset when they don't get a chance to vote. And so there's two questions here. First of all, the advance poll will be the normal time that you normally do, like a week or whatever it is. Is that the norm? Advance poll.
We're
and
proposing.
Then I'm going to ask about the mail-in ballots.
So we're proposing advance polls would probably be set, and once again, it will depend on what the situation is. We're hopeful to have a lot more advance polls, but once again, we'll have to look at what the situation and restrictions are in place at that time.
Okay.
the chief electoral officer in Saskatchewan isn't even sure at this point, depending on what the COVID restrictions may be and how that faces our polls. As for the mail-in ballots, we're very pleased to include that as well. What will happen is residents will be able to pick up, will be able to register prior to departing, and then we will mail the ballots once they're produced to where they're at. We're also taking into account for residents who may, because of COVID, don't want to come to a poll, so they'll be able to take advantage of the mail-in ballot system as well.
I mean, Your Worship, just a follow-up question. The advanced poll, I'm sure, will never disappear. This may be an exceptional year with the virus, but that's good. But the mail-in ballots, for whatever it's worth, Your Worship, I would suggest that Council look at this if they may, and the government allows it, is to have a mail-in ballot system for every election, because it's happening more and more all the time. Things are becoming more and more electronic. You're even getting me trained. So that's the way life is. And many people are still asking, and they have asked about this election. So I think it's just we're talking about making things easier for our voters. I would look at that in the long haul, and every 4 years, make sure you got a mail-in ballot system that works, because you know, I honestly believe that many folks would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Baker. Before I turn it to the city clerk, I'll just comment. I know that I follow the municipal news from across Canada, or try to on a daily basis. And some people have gone to all mail-in ballots, or I believe Nova Scotia is considering it somewhere in the east. And there's some resistance the other way to go completely mail-in. And I think what we want to do is to try and provide the best solutions to our residents. And there are people that will come to want to vote, but also the mail-in ballots, the advance polls, giving voters the opportunity to express themselves as easily as possible, while still being conventional or working with the system in place. City Clerk, is there anything else you can add to that you've in your discussions to Councillor Baker's comments or question?
I can say that we have we agree that mail-in ballots are a great option, and we will always recommend them. It's of course Council's purview whether they'd like them or not. We're looking at opportunities for voters to do a drive-through poll as well. We're looking at the best way that we can get voter engagement. Our communications team will be coming up with a voter engagement package, and they will be moving that forward on some of the dates in the future. But once again, yes, everything we can do to make voters give voters the opportunity to participate in an election, we will do, as long as it's allowed for by the Act.
Councillor Baker.
Your Worship, I just want to thank administration and yourself for looking at it in that light, because I think it's prudent, and I think it's a service that many people love, and it's just the right thing to do. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Buckingham. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two questions for you, probably to the city clerk, maybe yourself. With the ongoing COVID situation and the costs that are going to come along with having more advanced polls and so on and so forth, in either of your discussions, both with you as the mid-sized city mayors and everything else that you're involved in, Your Worship, or perhaps the city clerk, has the provincial government said anything about a program or anything that would cover off any of the extra costs for having extra days along with this? And the second question I would have is, what's the restrictions around mail-in ballots? When do they have to be in by a number of days before the election, or how does that work?
I'll maybe defer both of those to the city clerk, and then I'll fill in.
So the cost of a local election is borne by the city of Lloydminster, as well as because we do the school board election, those costs are shared with the different school boards. The province, Dr. Michael Boda, who is the chief electoral officer for the province of Saskatchewan, has indicated that the barriers and any other items that are able to be transferable to municipalities will be transferred to municipalities at the end of the provincial cycle. So we will benefit from the cost savings of them creating those individual barriers and those type of things. So we're looking forward to that. The level of cooperation between municipalities and the province is incredible. It's usually not to this level, and we've had several Zoom calls with the province in regards to this. So the cost will, I think, be more manageable, as well as with the safety as a result of COVID. Those items are taken into account. As for the mail-in ballot, what we're looking for is a person would naturally come in and register for the ballot. The ballot is for somebody who is not present and unable to be in the municipality when the voting takes place. They must be delivered before close of polls, and I'll get the exact time. I'm sure that Marilyn will pop it onto my screen in a second. As well as what we're doing is this other step is for a voter who is unable to attend or has restrictions as a result of COVID. We will make arrangements to do electronic registration.
City Manager.
Yeah, as with other programs, just to talk about the costs. If there are extra costs as a result of COVID, we will track those costs. And if an opportunity comes out for funding from provincial government, then we'd have those costs available for submission should a program come available.
So I'll just chime in from the city mayors of Saskatchewan. Certainly, there's been some brief discussions, but certainly most of that discussion work has happened at the city clerk's level between all the cities, as well as the city clerk alluded to the province. Certainly, we're aware of the situation, and I think the province, from what I hear from the Minister of Government Relations, is that they're dealing with the election, the upcoming provincial election in Saskatchewan, and will be working with the health authorities to ensure that it's safe and people will be able to cast their vote in a democratic way. So I think we'll just have to stay tuned and see what happens as we get closer to October 26th for the province of Saskatchewan and November 9th for the municipal elections. Any other questions?
If I may, the final answer to Councillor Buckingham's question is mail-in ballots have to be submitted to us before the close of polls, and applications for mail-in ballots can be made anytime after August 1st.
All right. Any other questions? Not seeing any. I will look for direction from Council on 8.2.2, the 2020 election report. Councillor Buckingham.
Move that Council approve the following regarding the 2020 municipal election. That the names of candidates be listed on the ballot alphabetically by surname and then, if necessary, by given name. That the rates for enumeration for election officials are as follows: supervising deputy returning officer $325 a day, issuing deputy returning officer $250 a day, receiving deputy returning officer $250 a day, poll clerk $185 a day, training sessions at $40 per session, and advance poll to be paid at same rate as regular polls shown above.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Diachuk, thank you very much. Any further discussion to the question that's before us? Not seeing any. All in favor?
Thank you, Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Council. Moving on to 8.3. I'll look to the City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 8.3.1, Quarter 2 financial statements for the month ending June 30th, 2020, I'll turn it over to our CFO, Denise McDonald, to present.
Good afternoon, Council, Your Worship.
Good afternoon.
This afternoon, I have before you the second quarter financial statements that I'll be looking for acceptance as they're presented. Just a few, I just wanted to go through some of the details on it. You can see that our financial statements presented to you are getting more and more consistent, and we're constantly working on improving those for you. At any time, if you feel you would like more information, certainly email me and I will see that we can add it in the future. So on the first statement is the statement of financial position, which is our balance sheet. You can see our cash position at June 30th, which is the first half of the year, in comparison to the previous year ends at December 31st. We're up from December 31st, but we're down from the previous year's number. The collection of 49.5% property taxes has increased our cash balance, but certainly not at the level as we were at in 2019. I think that is due to our payment relief options that Council provided. We have not received all of our tax payments. I think at this time last year, we would have been at 70% collected. So we have some to go and they are coming in regularly. So we're not really that concerned with it, but it's definitely reflected on our second quarter statement. Our short-term investments, you can see, are down slightly from year end. We are trying to move our financial investments into short terms in order to support the wastewater treatment facility. So the other line item that goes with that is our long-term investments are sitting at 16.2 million. The short-term investments average rate of return is sitting at 2.64%, which is up from first quarter, which was 2.62. Our long-term investments average interest rate is 3.16. So we're still earning a fairly decent return on that. The next item was taxes receivable and grants in lieu. We're sitting at 31.7 million. That's considerably higher than June 30th, 2019. We were sitting at 9.8 million. And so again, we want to mention that we're at 49.5 collected. Some of the larger companies have not yet remitted their taxes. They are taking advantage of that payment option. And so as we move forward, we are hopeful that by time we get to September, I believe it's September 10th, we are charging penalty on arrears. November 10th, we're charging penalty on current. So right now, it's what the deferral payment was to do with penalties, and we should be in a better position by then for sure. Trade and other receivables include ARs of 960,000, GST receivable. Utilities are sitting at 2.25 million, and unearned interest at June 30th was sitting at 560,000. As compared to 2019, our ARs are 21% lower. However, collection efforts have significantly improved since December of 2019. Additionally, due to COVID-19 forced closures, we are billing less, and the city suspended lease payments for lessees that were unable to operate. So the next item on there was our trade. So if we go into our liabilities, we're sitting at 4.3 in trade accounts payable, plus additional 1.8 for contracts accrued but not yet paid out relating to the RCMP. At June 30th, we owed 8.8 million to the schools, and we have made that payment to them. Our schools are paid on a percentage basis of what we collect, and so we are required to reconcile that and pay it to them monthly. Under deferred revenues, so you can see at December 31st, we are at 8.8, which makes sense because we typically reconcile that to ensure that the money that comes in the current year hits our income statement, and any other income that's related to future years hits deferred income. So as we move through the year, that deferred income will go down and then adjust at year end again. At this time, it includes 1.26 million of MSI grant that will move over as those projects expend money and get closed out. 4.55 of AMWWP for the wastewater treatment facility plant, and it also includes our joint regional growth study funds, as well as some unused gift certificates from the BioClean Aquatic Center, the Golf and Curling Center, and the SSC. The next item I wanted to bring to your attention, of course, is the work in progress. So that is similar to 2019, and you will see that you will see the details of that in the appendix. The last item on there is our under accumulated surplus and reserves. When you add the restricted reserves and unrestricted reserves together, we're currently sitting at 65 million. That, of course, is expected to decrease to 32 million by the end of the year if all our projects are completed. Last year at this time, we would have been sitting at 51.3 million. So our reserves are certainly gone up, and at the end of the year, December 31st, we knew that they were higher by 10 million. So that's consistent. So then if we go to the next portion, next page is the operating budget versus actual. And of course, our user fees are sitting there at 41% of budget spent, and our daily user fees ceased at the rec facilities on March 16th due to COVID closures. User fees and sales are about 22% below budget for the first 6 months of 2020. Utility revenues are about 9% below budget, and possibly lower due to commercial consumption from COVID-19. Of course, I want to caution you with numbers and comments of how much our income is down and our expenses are down due to COVID, because a lot of our expenses are 1 month delay, and our additional work is usually through the summer months, third quarter. So as we get to third quarter, you'll have a better understanding and accuracy of what's happened due to COVID. The next item on there is government transfers. We're sitting at 2.9, which is 73%. The large item in there that makes it increase over 2019 is the Saskatchewan government paid the revenue sharing grant out up front, which typically they would pay it out over a 8-month period. And this year they didn't. Due to COVID, they felt that they wanted to help municipalities by paying it out up front. Licenses and permits, we're sitting at business license renewals occurred in January, are currently at 42K under budget to date. Development permits are well under budget, likely a byproduct of the economy. However, an increase in home improvement projects such as decks was noted for May and June. So our business licenses are sitting at 92% of budget, and development permits are sitting at 21% of budget. Franchise and concession fees, we had checked with our franchisors, and it's consistent with the previous year, and they do not feel that there'll be an impact due to COVID. So we have those numbers seem to stand relevant to what they've told us. They are not experiencing any loss of income due to COVID. Investment income is sitting at 49%. And of the budget to date, and as a portion of our investments are in variable rates, we do have some risk as the rate decreases. However, we will have better understanding in Q3 and Q4, and since then we do feel that we are in a position that we could call for another investment in the very near future. So the next item on there under expenditures for income statement is the salary, wages, and benefits. So our salary, wages, and benefits are sitting at 41% of budget. Here's my note. Are sitting at, we're actually 20% below budget for the first 6 months of 2020, and there are multiple positions that are partially vacant. COVID layoffs and casual and part-time staff occurred in March, took effect April 1st, with savings being realized throughout Q2. When we look at contracted services, which is the next line item, they are also 18% below budget for the first 6 months. Cost savings may have been realized due to facility closures due to COVID, and anticipate additional costs in Q3 from work realized during closures of some facilities. Goods and materials is also down by 42, sitting at 42% of budget. Typically our costs for goods and material hit our books in quarter two and quarter three. So there, you know, it's hard to be overly excited about those numbers when there'll be a considerable amount of work hit our books in the third quarter. Then of course, utilities. So our utilities are sitting at 41% of budget, and we are 10% less citywide. Notably in the rec facilities have seen significant cost savings for utilities ranging from 25 to 50%. The water treatment plant also saw a 37% decrease. Keeping in mind, those bills can typically be 1 month delay. So they will hit our books in July if there's any further cost savings. So then the next page shows us our operating income statement by department. So you can see the general government is at 91%, and that's mostly due to posting our property taxes. And I mentioned earlier that we're sitting at 49.5% collected. Our franchise fees are included there, as well as our grants, which I mentioned earlier is the municipal revenue sharing. So when you're looking at the income statement, that's where it hits our books under departments. Protected services, we have a 1 month delay in recognizing our tickets and fine revenues. We're lower on the photo radar revenue than budgeted, and due to COVID, and grants have not yet been received under from the RCMP grant. And we have a reserve allocation from reserve of 717,000 yet to be posted. So I think you'll see a change there next quarter. Under environmental services, that's all our utilities are posted. That's water, wastewater treatment plant, the landfill, and recycling is all posted under environmental. We are below budget due to lower consumption with COVID-19 and a slower economy. We're at about 6% lower than 2019 at June 30th. The landfill has seen a significant decrease in commercial tonnage. So even though we had a considerable amount of residents going to the landfill, the commercial side of things was quite a bit down, and the landfill revenues are 50% less than expected for the remainder of the year. It's difficult to assess if it's due to COVID alone or the economic downturn. But compared to 2019, there is 60% less transaction from commercial businesses at the landfill. Under recreation and culture, we're sitting under budget for the revenue side of things, and LGCC started generating revenue in the quarter two, and daily user fees ceased at the rec facilities March 16th due to COVID. All facilities are trending below budget as a result. So we're sitting at 34% of budget at our rec facilities. Under the expenditure side of things, everything is fairly consistent or has been detailed prior. So I'm only highlighting the planning and development. You can see our expenditures are sitting at 30%, and planning and development includes land development and engineering. All three of those are below budget. For rec and culture, we are also sitting at 39% of budget. And this is due to majority of the rec facilities incurred a high proportion of their expenses in spring, summer, and fall, which is quarter two and quarter three. All departments are below budget, except for the library, Vic Juba Theatre, and Legacy Center. And the library and Vic Juba have been set on monthly payment plans effective January 1st of this year to kind of spread the costs of those contributions to those departments. So then if I can go to the capital page, you'll see that there's a comparison of 2020 budget. You'll see that our completed projects are up this year in comparison to last year. We're sitting at 22 projects completed versus 11 projects completed, and our in progress projects are sitting at 117. So we're well on our way to getting our projects started and implemented. And we have 39 that are not started for various reasons. With that, there's a detailed appendix showing all the capital projects, the actuals for the first 6 months, the budget, and whether the project has started or stopped. With that, I pass it back to the mayor for any questions from council.
Thank you, CFO. Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've said it before, and I guess I'll say it again, but you know, for our time on council, I think one of the things that I'm most happy about moving forward is the quality of the financial reporting that we're getting as a council now, especially from where we came from. Especially considering that we are at July 20th and we're looking at June 30th information. So not only is the information, I trust it to be reasonably accurate, but it's also timely. So if there needed to be a correction of course at some point, we actually have the information now that we can trust that if you needed to make a change in direction, we could do that. And that's something that we never had in the past. So, and the other thing is just generally with the information being presented, I like the consistent way that we're presenting it now, going through the significant variances, having them explain to us as to what's different and why. And it doesn't necessarily need a note on everything because we record all the council meetings. So I'm just really happy with the product that we're putting out there as far as financials on a regular basis. That's just my first comment for the CFO and her team. But then the other thing I just wanted to say was I do have an area of concern within this overall financial picture we're putting, and it's mostly just on the capital side. When I look at the number of 2019 projects that are not started or in progress, but they're only at 18% of their budget, to me that says that we're taking on way more than we can handle. And it makes me question whether or not we're doing some of the right things. I know on each individual, there'll likely be some reason and rationale, but it's just something we have to be really careful looking at when we go to create the budget this year. And especially if we're trying to, let's say, if the new council is trying to smooth changes to the mill rate with what was done this year as far as doing net decreases to the mill rate, we just got to be really careful with what we're doing and understand that, you know, just because we want to do everything and we have a huge deficit, if we don't have the resources to be able to do it, there's no sense in grabbing money for it. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case, but it just looks to me like perhaps we're biting off more than we can chew from a capital perspective. Not really a question there, more of a statement.
Thank you.
Any other
I'll pass your comments on to the rest of the team. Thank you for those comments.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Worship. I really appreciate Councilor Jonathan's comments from a financial point of view. However, I guess I've learned in the private world, you can do things differently than you can do it at the public service level. And I'm getting to enjoy more and more that council, or pardon me, administration is getting shovel ready. And sometimes we plan these projects and we know we can't get them started for 6 months, but they got to get started, they got to get planned, they got to get the design work done, and all that pre-construction work. If we're shovel ready, then when some grants come available, you're ready to go. And whether that's a penalty or not, we pay, but I don't think so. I think from a financial point of view, and you look strictly at financial, it may be. But I've learned that we've got a lot of grants over the years by having projects shovel ready. And I hope that we don't sway away from that, because sometimes out of the blue, a grant will pop up and if you don't have anything ready to go, you may be out of luck. And it's the first, as the saying goes, the first one to the dinner table, gets the potatoes. And I still believe that. So I guess there's two sides to it. But Jonathan, I do appreciate your in-depth review of finances and your ability to look at this stuff in a financial way. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
CFO?
I think it's important to state here, though, that we're right in the budget process for 2021. We are working hard to ensure that the capital budget is accurate. We're introducing contributions to reserves. We have not contributed to reserves in 2020. That's an important note. And in addition to that, we are going to be working, introducing to staff, managers of capital projects, that multi-year planning for capital. So if they can't, my understanding that in the past, we maybe have put in all the capital budget in 1 year with no intention of doing the whole year. So that meant the money had to go into reserves and pulled and carried forward into the other year when they knew all along we wouldn't get the project done. We are working on splitting that into a better cash flow for budgeting purposes also, so that if we only are doing the design phase this year and the rest of the capital work, we do it over a 3-year phase-in approach. So I think you're going to see in 2021 budget process, there's going to be some changes to how we're doing that also.
Your Worship, if I may, I think that's absolutely true. I'm not saying you design the whole project, spend all the money and you don't know if you're going to build it. But between our CFO and our city manager, I think they can assess what our division managers are doing and say, whoa or go. But it's important to have some of those projects in the design stage so that if you got to move forward, it won't take you a year to get there. And I still think that's important. But I think that monitoring would come from the senior managers within our city. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Baker. And I think that I'll just want to comment, and I'll catch Councillor Diachuk and then Councillor Torson, that we've made that move, and the administration brought that forward, trying to get ahead of the curve. And I think they need to be commended for that, that we are planning for, like you say, that when these grants just pop up, and this is a year that we've saw that from the provincial government of Saskatchewan. We may see some more federal money, we're not sure, and Alberta government stimulus money. And having those projects shovel ready are so key in today's date, because we can't wait. We were able to wait the wastewater treatment plant out because that was a significant amount of funding, and I won't even dwell on that one. But by all means, our engineering team has worked away at getting road repairs planned, water and sewer, stormwater, and I think each one of those are important, that we continue to, as council and the next councils to come, continue to give money to administration to get ahead of the game rather than just playing catch up, because as you said, Councillor Baker, if we're not there at the time, we're going to miss it. So point well taken on that, and I think administration is well on course for that. Councillor Diachuk and then Councillor Torson.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I guess, again, I just want to echo some of the things that in terms of the quality of the reports and quality of information that we're getting is, I think it's rich in detail, and I think really gives us lots of feedback relative to what we've accomplished, relative to what we said we wanted to do in terms of the actual year. In terms of the numbers of in progress, I guess, that was kind of one of the pieces I wanted to look at immediately because of the number of them. But then I also looked at the number of projects that are not started. And one of the concerns I think we had, going over the last couple of years was, maybe biting off more than we could chew. But when I look at 2020 not starting 39 projects, last year we didn't start 114 at this point in time. So I think we're getting better at managing our projects and actually getting them done. We're only halfway through the year. And I would, looking at some of the projects that aren't started in there, summer games, I think might be one of them, whatever. But overall, I think what I'm seeing is that if you look at complete and in progress, it's the majority of the projects are left to 39 that are outstanding. In my mind, that's good news, because some of them are really you know, there might be 1% of the project left to complete. And in that third quarter, we're going to get a report that's going to show that, you know, that category of in progress, by and large, you know, the bulk of them are going to be done. The only question I had, I guess, was that the joint growth study, it shows in here as being in progress. I thought we'd completed it. So it's page 1 and about 3/4 of the way down. 1003 196. So it says study plan joint growth study, and I thought we had completed that.
Yeah, there could be still some components within the annexation that are still being
Okay.
loaded to that code. So there could be some things within that that are, that you're right, the growth study is, but there's some other stuff dealing with annexation that may come up.
Oh, okay. So
as
it's
a
all right.
result
So
of yeah.
So it some of this is also I guess, you know, from a just a procedural piece where there might be odd detail that's still remaining on some of those, but I'm pleased that we moved away from all these projects we're not getting at, and we're not completing and carrying them forward. So I think we're taking a more realistic approach, pardon me, and actually seeing success of those numbers. So, you know, two parts. The reporting is great, but it's also giving us feedback relative to our planning and what we're capable of doing. So yeah, I'm quite happy with this. I think it's great.
If I can just respond to that, there's sometimes a delay in getting all the invoices in, and so we don't always mark it as complete until we are absolutely sure that all invoices are in and the manager of that project tells us it's complete. So we have had conversations between finance managers here that we need to get back to the managers and ask them to be a little more diligent about the project status. Where are they at on it? Some of them hadn't indicated that they had started it, but there was dollar money indicated there. So finance went line by line. And if there was invoices in there, we changed the status. So you're going to see a little better reporting on the actual project status when we get to third quarter.
Terrific. Thank you.
I also believe that we are taking forward a recommendation for projects that are already completed and get a report to council of how much cost savings there are because of that. Very shortly, in the month of August sometime. So
awesome. Thank you.
Councilor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think I think my mind was in the wrong place when I was talking about number of projects not started. Because I think I was thinking of it a different way, as though 2019. But when it shows the 2019 projects, that's at that date in 2019. This is where we were at, and I think I was looking at that the wrong way a little bit. But either way, what the CFO said sounds hopeful to me, and is a good thing as far as when we're creating these multi-year budgets for both operating and capital, to get an idea of these multi-year projects and having them funded appropriately in the year in which we'll be expending those amounts. One, because we'll have, after things like detailed design or quotes are already received, we'll have a better idea of how much the item's actually going to cost, which is going to result in more accurate budgeting as we go through that process, rather than the scenarios where we try and, grab all of a project at once when we don't necessarily have all the other parts and pieces, without knowing what the engineering design and everything will be on that project. However, I still agree with Councillor Baker as well that it is important for us to have some of these things ready to go for when opportunities come up, that we can put something forward and say, hey, we've got the perfect idea for something. But it's just about finding that balance, and I think that the way we have where we have gone to from where we were is actually getting us to that place where we can be a little more intelligent with our planning and have it a little more precise, and with that ends up being better results for the residents as far as the way we plan the finances of the city. So it's great. Thank you.
City Manager.
One of the challenges that I experienced in the past is for multi-year budgeting is when you do it over 3 years, technically your budget's only approved in that year. So you have 2 more years worth of funding that's not technically approved to spend. And so that's one of the reasons why they budgeted for the entire project in that first year. use the $80 million for the wastewater treatment plant, they budget for it, get it approved, and then continue moving that money forward. And that's the reason they, so it's a shift in how we do it, and it's just an awareness thing. It's one of the reasons why they did it that way, because you can technically have that money approved. If you only approve 40 of the 80 in the first year, you've got 40 million not approved budget wise in years 2, 3, and 4, or whatever, or however you're going to spend that. So we're working towards that and making sure those approvals are in place council wise, so that council in years 2 and 3, or year 2 and whatever it is moving forward, that project has the guaranteed funding, and we're not just wasting the money in year 1 and stopping the funding after that. So that's just a little explanation. But Councillor Torson, also to your point, we've our leadership team has placed a lot of emphasis on the making sure we can complete the projects. What we put forward, we can complete, and so quite happy with the progress that our team's made. And we're not perfect yet, but definitely it has been an emphasis on our budget year, and will continue to be an emphasis going into 2021.
Councillor Baker.
If I may, just to reiterate what our city manager said, in the private sector, if you roll past the year end, and I've said it before, you set up a reserve for completion. Just like our manager John spoke there, and you have to know the money's there to finish the project. And so you're starting to do that, and I saw it today, and I really like that, because if you're going to carry it forward, but just call it cost complete or whatever the word you're going to use. But we know, and everybody knows, that we got $1 million left to finish that project. And if we're done the second year and we still aren't done, and there's $200,000 left, just do that. I mean, if you don't know where your bank account's going to come up 0-0, and important. That's good.
Our focus has been making sure we don't double tax the taxpayers for one project. That's our main focus, and making sure we have that process in place.
Absolutely.
And as I look through the list, I'll remind council and the community, there's items at the airport that we've applied for federal funding for, the administration has, that are on the budget, which would be paid for by the federal government if the grant is approved, and they'll remain on that. They'll remain on the budget list on the capital projects until funding comes forward. That's not taxpayer money, but because of the process, it's a capital purchase. It's budgeted. We apply for the grant, and if we get missed this year, potentially next year. We went through this with the paving of the airport, and this council knows that very well. That it took a while to get the money secured to repave the runway at the airport. And those are just capital items that may carry on another year simply because they were not purchased because the funding didn't come through for it. So they're capital, but they're not taxpayer directly funded via the federal government. So those are examples where you'll have projects that I'm looking at 3 or 4 of them right here for the airport that I know are out for funding application, or the application's in. We've been told no, but we know that changes at a federal level sometimes very quickly. So they are in the loop, and we'll continue to work through those. So there's just an example of a couple projects there that may not get kicked off this year simply because we're waiting for funding. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any. I'll look for direction from council for 8.3.1. Councillor Discharge. We'll get your volume turned on.
All right. Move that council accept the financial statements as presented.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Monroe. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, CFO. Terrific report. Moving on to 8.5 operations. I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. To present 8.5.1 Direct Control DC1 Discretionary Use Application, I'll ask Anthony Andre to present from Planning.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon, Anthony.
The recommendation is that Council approve the change of use from single detached dwelling to office for the property located at 4910 36th Street, legally described as Lot 16, Block 5, Plan 66B 03398, subject to the following conditions. That the developer provide a letter of credit in the amount of 100% of the estimated cost of landscaping. Any signage required shall require a separate permit. Development shall conform to the Land Use Bylaw number 5-2016 and all federal, provincial, and municipal regulation, bylaws, standards, and policies that apply, including those pertaining to landscaping and parking, are followed. The applicant must maintain a fence between the property and the adjacent residential property to the east, and the applicant is responsible to contact Superior Safety Codes to confirm compliance to the current building code to the current building code for the city and submit a building permit if required. As this application represents discretionary use, Council can add, remove, or modify any or all of the conditions recommended in this report. Bylaws 17-2020 and 19-2020 were adopted May 27, 2020, redistricting the subject lands from R1 to DC1 within the Land Use Bylaw and designating the lands as residential within the MDP. The purpose of the discretionary use application is to allow a change in use from a single detached dwelling to an office. Council approval is required as per the direct control development regulations. An advertisement pertaining to the application was included in the Meridian Source on June 4th, 2020, when a 14-day referral period began to solicit comments from adjacent landowners. One response was received as a result, outlining the following concerns. An increased pressure to on-street parking along 36th Street, increased traffic along 36th Street, as well as the rear lane, sufficiency of space to accommodate vehicular maneuvering for rear parking, decrease in property values, and an overall increase in taxation, and the potential for the business to expand without review or approval. A substantial increase in vehicular traffic and parking is not anticipated due to the relatively low traffic generation from the 6 to 8 client visits anticipated per day. A total of 4 parking stalls, including 1 space within the garage as shown on the attached site plan, will be provided, 1 more than the 3 required by the Land Use Bylaw. The dimensions of the parking area are consistent with standard parking lot design. Therefore, we won't be amending any of the parking layout on 36th Street. The application is consistent with all applicable requirements of the MDP and the Land Use Bylaw. The change in use is not anticipated to impose negative impacts to adjacent or neighboring properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Questions or comments from council? Councilor Monroe.
So just a quick question. I'm just wondering, right now, they aren't expected to have a high traffic people coming. It's just going to be an office. And I've driven by there. There is ample parking in the back and to the west side. But should they decide, I know at this time they have explained to us that, you know, there won't be, the flower shop won't be in there or any other service. If they were to add additional services, would that have to come back to council or to administration to be approved? Or are they, once they have this approved, are they able to make those changes without having that further contact with us?
So under the direct control regulations, any changes to the way that the site operates would have to come back to council again for approval.
Okay.
Anthony, being a private business, is there requirements for a handicap parking stall in one of those 4 stalls?
So the barrier-free parking is regulated by the Alberta Building Code in Lloydminster. And once you get to a certain number of required parking stalls, a space is required, but I don't believe this meets that number quite yet.
Okay. Councilor Baker.
Your worship, I didn't quite catch what Hunter said about the parking on 36th Street. When you read it out, did you say it wasn't any change required?
Correct. Due to the fact that we're not anticipating a large increase in the number of parking required, due to the fact that this is a relatively low traffic generating business, we won't be recommending any changes to the parking scheme.
If I may, your worship?
Yes, you may, Councilor Baker.
Thank you. I guess one car is too many if it's parked on the corner of in front of that building. It does, you don't need 10 cars to block traffic. And I wondered what engineering had thought when they did the study, if they even looked at it. That was my question earlier today.
Sure.
You don't need 10 vehicles to park there to create a traffic jam. One will do the job.
Yeah, engineering did have a chance to review. I'm not sure where the edge of where parking is required along 36th, but I can certainly request that they take a look at that.
Well, I guess I just want to make sure that 3 months from now we don't hear about this, that it's a problem on 36th Street at the corner. That's all I'm saying. That's just an opinion.
Well, it's certainly, I hear what you're saying, Councilor Baker, and I wrestle with, because there's parking along 36 currently now, I believe, along all those properties that face 36th Street to the south. But I'm wondering if we could ask engineering, or one of the proposals we'd add is that we paint back 25 feet from the corner, yellow curbing, no parking for that corner, so that people realize, you know, someone parks and they think they're back far enough, but it gets in the sight line. So is that, I don't know if that's reasonable, 25 feet. I'm not sure what the setback is from a corner when we painted yellow, yeah. But that would certainly, I hear what you're saying, and I think that would help alleviate some of the concern, because no one can stop someone from parking on a public street if parking is allowed. But other than if we, in this case, set forward the direction and determine X number of feet. And I'd look to the city clerk if he can give me a number, or city manager, how far usually a setback is from a corner that might be painted yellow, if they have a number.
I believe it's 3 meters is the normal setback if there's a traffic control device at the intersection. But I'd have to confirm that with our public safety team.
Councilor Baker?
Your worship, but it's just an oddball corner. It's about the silliest corner we got in town.
Yeah.
You got a highway and a roadway to the 7-Eleven mall going south. You got a highway and a service road going north, 25 feet apart or 100 feet apart. You got 49th Avenue about 4 doors away going north, south, east, and west. It's just a unique corner.
Absolutely.
In the city, if you want to call it unique.
Yeah.
I call it something else. And at the end of the day, when you're going westbound on 36th Street, you want to make a right-hand turn. You don't make that turn from the left-hand lane. At least you're not supposed to. You're supposed to turn from the right-hand lane. That's why I'm asking, where does engineering sit on this? Or traffic control, whatever department? Because I'm not suggesting it never did, that you shut it down all the parking on 36th Street. I'm talking so you can pull up in front of that house and make a right-hand turn. Or
Absolutely.
You have a right-hand lane to go through to 17th, and people now back up over the service road on the east side of 17, north of 36th Street. And people are backed up behind that because they can't make the right turn even to go down the service road. So there's some problems there, I think. And I'd like to see our transportation services do some work on that thing and make sure it works. If all it means, and Mr. Spenrath isn't of concern, regardless of what he's concerned about, if there's no parking in front of that business, then they won't be in the road. But I just want you to look at it. I already hear about that corner, and I'm sure other council members have heard about that corner. So I'll leave it with you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Torreson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just want to say, from what I can see on the site plan, I think it's very clear to me, and thank you to administration for having the applicant bring this forward. Because now, for myself, I can clearly see where the on-site parking is, and that there is the ability to have a handful of on-site parking stalls. And then with the movement of the main entrance to the west side of the building, where it would now be on the service road, I don't see a lot of people using 36th Street as the main parking spot. I suppose it's possible, but you would think most people would park on the service road or on the on-site parking based on what you can see. So I think it's actually quite possibly the ideal solution for a property like this if you're moving into the direct control. Because to me, it's pretty straightforward. Is you've now got a west entrance on this building that's going to be the main entrance, and 95% of the people are likely going to park on the service road. The 5% that are really close might park in the on-site parking in the back, but I just don't see it being much of an issue, and especially with the type of business that it is, that if you only have 1 or 2 or even 3 people working in that building, you're only going to have, at most 2 cars per appointment, which is at most 6 cars there at a time. And with the number of spots you would have on that service road, I just don't see it being an issue. But thank you for having a site plan included on this, because I think it really clears up the issue for me.
Councillor Fagnan. Oh, Councillor Fagnan, you're still, hang on, you're muted there.
There we go.
There you are.
I agree with most of the comments from my fellow councillors there, and with Councillor Torres, and that was what my suggestion is. I think that with that going to the west side, there's no question that it's going to draw people that way. I used to live down in that area. I used to travel that street probably 5 or 6 times a day. And in my mind, I don't think I've ever seen a car parked on 36th Street. You're putting your life in your own hands if you're going to be parking by there. So, and I think with Mr. Spinrath there and putting signage up on front, I think that most people will understand that. I've done business with that particular company. We've got 8 vehicles that are insured there, and I've been in there, I think, twice in the last 5 years. So I agree totally. I had gone, a few months ago, taking a look at the back, did a good research there as far as backing in, backing out. There's lots of room. So I just think that that it's the individuals that are unhappy with it going there, those they're kind of frivolous is what their requests are. I don't think that there's anything to that with increased taxes. But if we were to take a look at doing something with engineering on 36th Street, as far as good marks that they shouldn't park there, I don't foresee any problems at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. City Manager, if I can ask, I don't know, we don't have anybody directly from engineering, but there is some long-term plans for that intersection, is there not? 36th and 50th, because I know that's a discussion point with many different people in the community.
I don't have there is long-term plans. I don't know the exact year that those plans are. Don, if Don was on, he might have the exact year, but I'm not aware of the year that's slated for. But we will engage with our engineering team if there's if it's an issue, then we will work, as the property owner has indicated. He is willing to work with the city on the parking requirements, and should it be a problem, we can address them.
I see Executive Manager Stang is not looking for an actual date, but I guess more to let people know that there is that intersection is an area of concern for the city, and it will be addressed. Again, it's always budgetary money, but we will see some significant changes, I suspect, when that does happen. Is that?
I'll have to do some digging into that, Your Worship, and provide that information to council. The last I understood with that intersection was tied to the north-south corridor project. So that is obviously some time away.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Not seeing any. I'll look for direction from council on 8.5.1, the direct control discretionary use application. Councillor Buckingham.
Move the council approve the change of use from single detached dwelling to office for the property located at 4910 36th Street, legally described as Lot 16, Block 5, Plan 66B 03398, subject to the following conditions. The developer landowner shall provide to the City of Lloydminster a letter of credit in the amount of 100% of the estimated cost of all landscaping. Any signage required for the development shall require a separate permit application. Development shall conform to Land Use Bylaw 5/2016 and all federal, provincial, and municipal regulations, bylaws, standards, and policies that apply, including those pertaining to landscaping as well as parking and loading. The applicant must maintain a fence between the property and the adjacent residential property to the east, and the applicant is responsible to contact Superior Safety Codes to confirm compliance to the current building code for the city and submit a building permit if required.
Seconder. Councillor Monroe, thank you very much. Any further discussion on this matter? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you, guys.
Moving on to 8.5.2, City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 8.5.2, Neely Edmonds Downstream User Impact Study Fund Allocation and Sole Source Contractor Award, I'll ask Karen De La Rosa to present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Karen.
So before you today is a request for a decision with a recommendation that Council approve the allocation of $67,741.90 to the Neely Edmonds Downstream User Impact Study and $26,347.67 to the Neely Edmonds Hydraulic Assessment for a total amount of $94,089.55 excluding GST from the Capital Reserve Environmental Services 1-400-410-35140. And that Council award a contract for the Neely Edmonds Downstream User Impact Study to Hutchinson Environmental Limited of Bracebridge, Ontario, as per quotation dated June 19, 2020, and an estimated contract cost of $58,906 plus a contingency of 15% contingency of $8,835.90 for a total amount of $67,741 excluding GST. So currently all of our treated effluent is conveyed to the North Saskatchewan River by a 25 kilometer pipeline that's about built in the 1980s. Based on the future flow projections of the wastewater treatment plant, the pipeline's capacity will be exceeded at numerous flow conditions in the next 20 years. Also, this pipeline being over 30 years old, the condition of the pipeline and also the limited capacity of the pipeline establishes a need for a major upgrade in the future. With this significant capital costs for the upgrades, we are proactively seeking alternative options for discharging our treated effluent. The new mechanical wastewater treatment facility team has identified the Neely Edmonds complex as a potential alternative discharge location. We had conducted a preliminary assessment of the Neely Edmonds as an alternative discharge location. However, we had removed that as part of the scope of the project for the new wastewater treatment facility to ensure that the project proceeds without delay. So to complete our evaluation of this option, of this alternative discharge option, we need to complete a downstream user impact study, which will evaluate the impact of discharging treated effluent into the Neely Edmonds from a quality perspective, and also a hydraulic assessment, which will evaluate the impact of discharging treated effluent into the Neely Edmonds from a quantity perspective. So this item was not budgeted for 2020, so our recommendation is to reallocate funds from capital reserve to complete these assessments. These assessments will allow us to make informed decisions regarding our treated effluent pipeline, and also allow us to explore some potential opportunities and other alternatives. Hutchinson Environmental completed the initial preliminary downstream user impact study in January of 2019. So sole sourcing Hutchinson Environmental for to complete the downstream user impact study will result in cost savings and also in time savings from their previous knowledge of the project.
Thank you, Karen. Questions or comments, Council? Councilor Discharge.
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess I was this was an interesting read, given that we've had some discussions about our capacity to treat wastewater and you know, look in partnerships with other neighbors. And this is kind of the beginning of the first time we've talked about our ability to actually discharge the waste, and we haven't really given as much attention to it perhaps as we should have at the front end. So a couple of questions. One is that if the quality of the water is actually going to be better than the city, and potentially we have sales for water, how does this fit into this? Because this is in the next 20 years at various flow. So this is 20 years out, or is this part of the, I guess I'm rambling, sorry. Is the study necessary as part of the wastewater treatment plants going forward? Or is this part of a separate piece around the actual quantity of discharge?
So this is not part of the wastewater treatment plant project. We knew that when we did the initial assessment that we had to basically choose a discharge location for the wastewater treatment plant, which will continue to be the North Saskatchewan River. This assessment will help us apply for apply for options to discharge in a different discharge location, which in this case would be the Edmonds complex.
So I guess if I could follow up, Your Worship, you know, we've talked about the potential, and one of the potential offshoots, I guess, of the wastewater treatment plant is actually selling some of our wastewater that we'd be discharging. So is one, you know, becoming or running ahead of the other, or where are we at in all these discussions? Because I'm trying to piece all this together where one, we might sell the water, two, we want to enhance our capacity, but it's 20 years out. It's not contingent on the wastewater treatment plant. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. I see the need, but I've never ever heard us talk about capacity. So it's not that it's not an important or needed issue. I just need some help for someone to sort of explain this to me a little bit better, I guess.
So in terms of a capacity perspective, when we when we initially looked at the wastewater treatment plant flow projections, that's where the capacity has definitely raised a red flag. The capacity of the effluent pipeline is about 25,920 cubic meters a day, and during huge storm events, the inflow into the wastewater treatment plant, or the amount of water that we need to treat, exceeds the capacity of what we can actually pump into the North Saskatchewan River. There are some discussions still on the reuse side of things. However, there are still a lot of regulatory hoops that we have to go through to actually see that into fruition. And I guess the other aspect from the reuse or selling our effluent is the commitment from the market. If we have a commitment from the market that they're willing to purchase our treated effluent, then that becomes more of a viable option. This downstream impact study and hydraulic assessment will just help us to basically explore an alternative avenue should those avenues not come into fruition in the future.
Okay, so thanks. So it's not just the effluent, but it's also the I guess the runoff that is pressing our capacity limits as well. Then.
That's correct, Councillor Diachuk. So just to kind of give you a perspective of the numbers, our normal dry weather flow effluent numbers are around 11,000 to 12,000 cubes per day. During a heavy storm event, that can go up to about 72,000 cubic meters per day.
Okay.
So it increases sevenfold, and the infiltration and inflow and the amount of runoff that goes into a plant definitely puts a lot of strain into how much we can treat and also how much we can pump out.
Executive Manager Sting, I see you wanted to comment.
Yeah, I think Karen articulated it very well. The studies that we're asking for today are tied to the wastewater treatment plant, although not required for the design and construction of a new wastewater treatment plant. It gives us the evaluation of the system for future operation considerations. That gets taken into context with what you're talking about, Councillor, with regards to effluent being discharged. One of the big things we're looking at is the pumping system, or the entire infrastructure that we pump back to the river, and the future viability of that, and how much life that still has left. And we're trying to figure out what other options we have. And these studies are step one in trying to determine the other options. And we can't pursue another option without fully understanding the hydrology and the impact of the effluent downstream. So that's what these studies are meant to do. Yes, they're tied to the wastewater treatment plant, but more of an operational perspective than the design and construction perspective.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say as well, if I can, is that they're also going to look at how much life there's left in our pipeline as well. Then that's what I'm for.
No, not under this specific study.
Okay.
It is something we have looked at. Karen, shake your head if I'm correct or incorrect here, but something we have been evaluating as part of the process for the new design of the wastewater treatment plants and the capacity of that. This is just taking an alternative structure or infrastructure and determining if it's a viable option for future use.
Okay,
and the sooner we do this, the better. It helps all the other conversations that you were talking about, Councillor, from a reuse to alternative stormwater discharge, or not stormwater emergency discharge, and all those things. So it does all kind of come together at the end.
So sorry, I'm just one follow up, because I guess I would want us to return to this part of the discussion at some point in time, and we have discussions with our neighbors around wastewater treatment as well, because I think this is an important piece of that discussion. That's all.
Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah.
Councillor Buckingham, and then I'll get Councillor Baker.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was happy to see this. You know, to me, it speaks to long-term planning. We know that pipeline in the ground, both, I think Karen was only referring to what's going back to the river, but we know that what's coming from the river is almost the same age as what's going back. So, you know, over the next number of years, not imminent, but over the next number of years, there's going to be some major investment going to have to be made to that. And these kinds of studies will give us the opportunity to, if that was under construction, if we had a major failure, if something was going on, gives us another option. So to me, it just speaks to a good long-range planning, so we don't end up in a train wreck 2 or 3 councils down the road because this council didn't deal with something like this in an appropriate time fashion. So I appreciate it coming forward, and think it just speaks to good long-range planning and good activity. So thank you for that, guys.
Councillor Baker, and then Councillor Torreson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not questioning the study or the pipeline to the river at all. What I want to ask about is many years ago, when the water treatment plant, the pipeline from the river to the city was built and the sewage line was built, the first question to ask, you build the discharge line before you build the intake line. That was the law, because you had to get rid of the wastewater. And one of the things that happened over the years, if you check the records, and I'm sure some of you know, the Man Ranch and others up in the Hillmont area built a big dugout. And they took water for a number of years from the wastewater treatment plant for irrigation purposes. And I don't know if that is still happening or not. But certainly, what I heard in the past, they took a huge amount of wastewater out of our system. They also said that you have to put half of what you take out of the river. What you take out of the river, half it has to go back. And so I don't know where we're set on that statistic. But at the same time, as Councillor Michael said, we had talked about other sources of selling the water. And I think of the upgrader and the amount of water that's pumped over to the upgrader out of our line system from the lake. If it's possible that the upgrader can even use this water, which I assume it can, then that should be also part of the equation in the near future. So, but my real question is, are we still providing water to the ranchers for irrigation? Thank you.
So,
or I'll let.
Yeah, I can take a crack at it. I'll let Karen talk about daily operations, but I know that co-op was in discussion with the city a year or even 2 years ago with regards to entering into a long-term agreement for the effluent to be discharged into that pond. At the time, due to where we were with the wastewater treatment plant, the city didn't commit to any long-term plan or long-term option to provide effluent to the farm co-op or the group that Councillor Baker's talking to. So currently, we don't have an agreement that provides effluent. Although I think their current operations still allow them to use that water if necessary. Karen, you can comment on the operations, but just before we go into that, with regards to the other comments you made with regards to how much water has to go back to the river and not go back to the river, those are part of the studies and evaluations that Karen's doing, and part of that process is these two reports, and then there's obviously some conversations and potential license reviews with our regulatory bodies both in Alberta and Saskatchewan. So those are all part of the discussions that are happening, Councillor. Okay. The opportunities for the effluent in the future are many. I would say there are options and there is interest in the effluent, and those are conversations that we are having, and Council will be informed.
If I can just add to that, so the group that Councillor Baker was talking about is the Northminster Irrigation District, and their contract with the city expired in 2012. We had sent out a request for expression of interest way back in 2015. However, we have not received anything from them. And as Executive Manager Stang had mentioned, we have been in conversation with them last year. However, we have not entered into a new agreement. Right now, they do not have an agreement with the city, so they are not able to use any of the treated effluent that goes back to the river. So currently, they do not have access to the treated effluent. As for the comment on what we need to return to the North Saskatchewan River, our license with our diversion license with Alberta Environmental Parks mandates that we return 90% of what we pull from the North Saskatchewan River. Should we divert that anywhere else other than the North Saskatchewan, it will trigger an amendment of our water license with Alberta Environmental Parks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So my question regarding this item is, I guess I was just surprised that one way or another this doesn't fit within the scope of the wastewater treatment plant project. Because when I look at it, you know, it seems very close to fitting within the mandate of that project, and I'm always one who's in favor of only paying 30% of the bill rather than 100% of the bill. So I'm just kind of curious, why is it that this doesn't fit exactly within that? And also combined with, kind of the thought that I was under the impression that the IPD contract was very flexible to be able to include things like this within it.
So the decision to remove this as part of the project is basically based on the complexity and the timelines of exploring this option. So we have a deadline of December 1st, 2023 for the new wastewater treatment facility. And these studies and these regulatory requirements that would need to go through will require a significant amount of time. So that was one of the, I guess, one of the major factors why we have removed it from the scope of work. And Executive Manager Stan can add more probably to the scope of work in terms from a funding perspective. I do not believe that this is covered within the approved funding for the new wastewater treatment facility.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I don't think it, I'm pretty sure we did the evaluation. It wouldn't be eligible funding. Therefore, it would be 100% city cost, unfunded budget. And Karen's accurate, number one, from a budget and from a time commitment perspective. This is a study we feel we can capture and deal with on our own and don't need to add consultants into the middle of these reports and have that influence on that. So these are more operational, Councillor, than they are tied to the design. The wastewater treatment plant is going to discharge, whether it goes to, well, it's going to go to the North Saskatchewan River through our existing pumping system. And these reports don't have an impact on that until such time we have an amended license. So this could take significant amount of time to get these reports and this project completed to a sense where our regulatory bodies are happy with what information we're providing. So that's why it's been excluded and we're capturing it on its own.
Okay. So at the end of the day, so that residents are clear if they're looking at this and thinking, hey, why isn't that part of it? So the wastewater treatment funding ends at basically the discharge pump. Like that's the end of the line for what that program will cover? Or is it even before that?
Yeah, I don't have all the details of eligible and ineligible funds, but these are funds required for determining future operations, not the actual construction of the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay. Well,
so it would be the same, Councillor, as bringing an offsite service to the site. Those offsite services more than likely aren't eligible cost either. So it would be on-site construction.
Okay. One other comment I had was just that generally speaking, I'm happy that we're doing it because I agree in principle that, if we've already have a system that kind of drains west to east and we'll take it back to the body of water we want to get it to either way, if it's possible to do it at basically no or low cost, first of all, there could be environmental benefits of not using as much energy to get it back to the river. And second of all, it's cheaper for us in the long run. So long as that, environmentally, there's no impact down the road for, any of the farms or anything like that. We're not going to flood anyone out, all those other things, so long as we've got all those covered off. But in the long run, I think it makes sense if it is possible to go down that route to allow for just a natural drainage system rather than to have a pump running all the time.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the reports will do, Councillor. Determine whether we're going to have an impact hydraulically, how much, if any, flooding would occur, and what it does to the water quality on that system. So that's exactly what these two reports will do.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Worship. This just carries on from what we talked about earlier today about having projects ready. If you recall, and I know you do, Your Worship, the wastewater treatment plant, to get the funding for that took how many years?
3.
And it happens 3 years of hard work. And that was probably after a certain amount of work had been done on it, whatever that might be. So I think what's critically important to our city for the future is get all this information together And then as time goes on and as needs require, then add to it. Oh, I don't know what a pipeline would cost. Did you say 20 miles or 25 miles of pipeline?
25K.
25 kilometers. And based on the cost estimate that we did back in 2022 or 2014, twinning the pipeline would cost about $22 million.
Oh, that's cheap compared to the waste.
That was 2014, sir. 2014 numbers. So,
but I think that's important when you're planning your long range capital too. And if you got to put away $500,000 a year or whatever for future planning in your reserves, and you know it's coming, good plan. That's all I can say. But again, it's part of that project ready, getting started so you know where you're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. I think that comments well received all the way around. I was a little concerned as we've worked through this. I feel a lot more comfortable, especially when we're talking about the hydraulic modeling that needs to happen on the Edmonds-Neely complex, because that was done 35, 40 years ago based on runoff and a city that was much smaller size and all sorts of things. And a lot of things have changed since Ducks Unlimited built that complex of 5 dams, and we continue to use today and maintain. And I think that ensuring that we do, because we're responsible for those dams, so if there's got to be additional work done in that complex, and it does work, then we need to know that as well, as you've said, Councillor Baker, and identifying capital costs, because everything has a capital cost. If it's not today, tomorrow, 10 years, 20 years down the road. And I think that future councils will want to know what they're looking at and facing the issues, because we know water and sewer are major issues that have to be dealt with. So I certainly appreciate where we're at and getting that information so that we can make good decisions when it comes forward to council. So I appreciate it bringing it forward, Karen. Any other comments? Not seeing any. I'll look to council for direction on 8.5.2. Councillor Buckingham.
Move the council approve the allocation of $67,741.90 to the Neely Evans Downstream User Impact Study and $26,347.65 to the Neely Evans Hydraulic Assessment for a total amount of $94,089.55, excluding GST, from the Capital Reserve Environmental Services number 1-400-410-35140.
I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Baker, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Opposed? Carried. I'll look to council for second portion. Councillor Buckingham.
Move that council award the contract for the Neely Evans Downstream User Impact Study to Hutchinson Environmental Limited of Bracebridge, Ontario, as per quotation dated June 19th, 2020, at an estimated contract cost of $58,906 plus a 15% contingency fund of $8,835.90 for a total amount of $67,741.90, excluding GST.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Baker. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion as presented? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Karen.
thank you, Your Worship and Council.
Moving on to 8.5.3, City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 8.5.3, 50th Avenue Highway 17 Timing and Coordination Improvement Contractor Sole Source Award, I'll ask James Rogers to present.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon, James.
Before you is the 50th Avenue or Highway 17 Timing and Coordination Improvements Contractor or Sole Source Award. The recommendation is that Council approve the Sole Source Award of the 50th Avenue or Highway 17 Timing and Coordination Improvements Contractor to Can Traffic Services Limited for $295,579, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 20136110, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. In addition, that council approve a contingency allowance of 10% in the amount of $29,557.90, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 2013610. Due to the specialized nature of the work, administration is seeking to sole source procure contractor services to complete the hardware upgrades and software implementation associated with the 50th Avenue Timing and Coordination Improvements Capital Project. As presented at the July 13th, 2020 Governance and Priorities Committee meeting, the scope of the 50th Avenue Timing and Coordination Improvements Program will closely mimic that of the 2019 traffic signal hardware upgrades, which was completed along 44th Street or Highway 16, with minor adjustments to account for lessons learned, which will introduce project efficiencies. Upon reviewing the final scope of work and additional support provided by CAN Traffic Services Limited throughout 2019 and 2020, culminating in the completion of the 2019 traffic signal hardware upgrades, administration has determined that by sole source procuring to CAN Traffic Services Limited to include work along 50th Avenue corridor would provide significant project efficiencies and cost savings due to the site-specific background knowledge gathered. Because the Centrex ATM system software and other needed communication hardware is already being purchased by the City of Lloydminster for the 44th Street project, the scope of work for CAN Traffic would be limited to the installation of hardware within the cabinets, provide troubleshooting assistance, and prepare base signal timing plans for 50th Avenue. The software and hardware purchased in 2019 for phase 1 of the program can handle the expanded system on 50th Avenue and will not require expansion. The 50th Avenue Timing and Coordination Improvement Program will include hardware upgrades and modifications at the following intersections along 50th Avenue: 12th Street, 18th Street, 25th Street, 29th Street, 36th Street, 52nd Street, 48th Street, and 50th Street. Administration issued a bid document to CAN Traffic Services Limited to determine the final scope of work and secure a quotation. The quotation has been reviewed by administration and deemed reasonable for the given scope of work. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mayor and Council for any questions you may have.
Thank you, James. Questions or comments? I know this came to GPC last week, James, but for anybody that didn't attend that meeting or hear the discussion, certainly the hardware or the brains of the operation was procured in 2019. So that's really where there's a cost saving in 2020 for us to move forward on completing Highway 17's lights. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that's correct. Thank you for that, Mayor. So the operational system, and so that would be the Centrex Automated Transportation Management System, or Centrex ATM system, and the adaptive module, which is the real-time runnings of that system, were procured as part of phase 1 in 2019. They are operational, and as I said, they can be expanded to include the hardware or the camera upgrades we're going to do on 50th Avenue.
Okay, James, if I can ask this, are we 100% complete on 44th Street, and people, what are we experiencing
at this time? We have been successful in deploying the Centrex ATM system with the adaptive module on Highway 16 or 44th Street. We have seen drastically improved travel times for motorists passing through the City of Lloydminster, as we have coordinated the intersections, and they are working to coordinate themselves to increase or lengthen that green band where a motorist traveling east to west, per se, can basically hit the green lights as they go through the city, on a fairly frequent basis. So, but we have seen some drastic improvement in those travel times, and I believe, as I reported last time, we have seen improvements on average travel times of a reduction of about 2 minutes for east-west traffic.
Thank you. Councillor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. That last thing I was just going to say, the 2 minutes, when you're traveling in Lloydminster and it takes about 9 minutes to get anywhere, that is a pretty significant percentage of improvement. No, I just wanted to say generally on this project and the last one, some people wonder why we are still doing projects like this. I saw something recently, and to me, this is one where we got feedback from the community and they said it was really important to them. So this was a win of something we could do that could improve the traffic flow. And I want to say that in my experience on Highway 16, to me, the system works like better than ever. If you're going east to west or west to east, I find that you get through a lot quicker than you used to. And I know there's a lot of people out there like me that would take, any other path to get where they were going and avoid the highways just because you felt like that was the slowest way to get anywhere. And I know now that I'm on council that that's terrible for the roads that aren't built for that. So I think this is a good thing and a good investment for the city long term, so that people aren't doing what I used to do, which is take a service road instead of going down the main drag because it's quicker to get from A to B, because those roads just aren't built to take that level of traffic. So no, it's good to see. Whether we do sole source or not, I think in this case, when you're using the same piece of technology and you want them to all communicate with each other, it makes perfect sense that in this scenario you would do that, assuming that CAN Traffic is one of the only kind of licensed providers of this product, or at least we know with certainty that their equipment will connect with the other equipment so that the entire system works as one. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Not seeing any, I'll look for direction from council on 8.5.3, the 50th Avenue, Highway 17 timing coordination. Councillor Thorson.
I move that council approve the sole source award of the 50th Avenue, Highway 17 timing and coordination improvements contractor to CAN Traffic Services Limited for $295,579 excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 2013610, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. In addition, that council approve a contingency allowance of 10% in the amount of $29,557.90, excluding GST, to be allocated from 2020 capital budget project number 2013610.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Monroe, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, James. And I have, through the city manager, I see you're on to 8.5.4. So back to you, James.
Thank you very much. So before you is the River Intake Dam Construction Contractor Award. The recommendation is that council approve the award of the River Intake Dam Construction Contractor to Kitchen Contracting Limited of Atchison, Alberta, in the amount of $1,267,295, excluding GST, plus a 15% contingency in the amount of $190,094.25, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 2013602 and the Environmental Services Self-Supported Capital Reserve number 1-400-410-35140. And in addition, that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. To address current sedimentation issues at the City of Leominster's river intake structure, administration is looking to construct a sheets pile deflector spur within the North Saskatchewan River upstream of the existing river intake. In 2018, the City of Leominster retained an engineering consultant to review the existing design and create a detailed design package for a deflector spur to be constructed within the North Saskatchewan River. The goal of the deflector spur is to reduce sedimentation around the existing river intake and improve routine operation. This process involved the survey of the North Saskatchewan River at the location of the intake, hydraulic modeling of various structure options, and an optimization of the chosen design. The design and modeling report was reviewed by administration, and it was determined that the city would move forward with the tendering and construction designed sheet pile spur. The city issued a bid document to acquire the services of an experienced prime contractor to complete all construction activities for this project on June 17, 2020. The bid document package was issued and posted to the city's bids and tenders website. The tender period closed on July 14th, 2020, with 2 bids being received and reviewed for completeness. Kitchen Contracting Limited and PCL Construction Management Incorporated submitted on the project. Construction for this project is anticipated to start in September 2020 and is expected to be completed by October 31st, 2020. With that, I'll turn it over to Mayor and Council for any questions they may have.
Thank you, James. Any questions from Council? James, the one I had was, what are we looking at for a lifespan? Driven steel or sheet piling has a lifespan. What's the engineering estimate, that 20 years, 25 years, or we will hopefully get even more than that with that construction?
Thank you for your question. No, I will have to confirm with our consultant or the designer on that one to provide accurate information on that. But this is a well-used or a well-known or implemented technology within this scenario. Kitchen Contracting has installed 2 of these almost identical structures within the North Saskatchewan. So it is proven. But with respect to your question and life cycle, it would definitely be quite lengthy, but I will report back and get that to you.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I'm sure we're well over 20 years, but I'd just be curious so people understand that the investment that's being made in the river today will serve this community well for a number of years, and as every project does. But when you're driving steel into sand and water, people might wonder, we know there'll be corrosion and things like that, and we don't want something that's going to wash out in 5 years. And I'm sure it won't, but from that perspective. And you also answered my second question. I appreciate the contractor being chosen, having experience on at least 2 jobs like this and projects. And again, driving steel is one of those that not everybody does every day. And I was surprised there was only 2 bids, but if that's what there was, certainly appreciate the 2 bids that came forward. Any other, Councillor Baker?
Your Worship, Kitchen, as we know them in Lloydminster, have a business in Lloyd. In Atchison or West Edmonton, they have a huge operation. Like what you see in Lloydminster is just a drop in the bucket to compare to their holdings and equipment that they have. And I know a local boy was a superintendent on bridge building for these folks for a number of years and built a lot of small bridges in northern Alberta. And sheet piling was one of the big expertises that they had. So 2 things happened. We got a local contractor, somewhat, and it was a lot lower than some of the big boys that thought they're going to make a buck, or I don't know what they're going to do. But in any case, what was our budget? Did we have a budget for this?
We did. James, do you want to discuss the budgetary implications?
Yeah, so thank you for your question, Councillor Baker. So the original budget that we had for the program was $1,460,000. And we are under that budget. We are looking for an allocation from the Environmental Services Reserve just to cover any contingency that might come up through construction in the river, given that we are working in the North Saskatchewan River.
That was pretty good.
Not bad at all.
Yeah.
Councillor Detached.
Yeah, just a quick operational question. Is this going to be a project when in the winter, or is it, summer project?
Thank you for your question. So no, this project will not be in the summer. As part of some of our permits and approvals that we have received, we do have to construct this in low flow times. So we are looking to actually construct this September, October. We do not want to construct this in frozen condition, as then we have to deal with ice, snow, and then the ground is actually frozen and we can't drive the sheet piles. So we are in that low flow, but not frozen condition.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from Council? Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just as far as just kind of giving maybe a little more depth, why it's important to have have this spur there as far as what does it do for the pumps out of the river and really what the point of it is, just for the public in case they're watching, because I see it as being important, but that's because I've heard a little bit about the river intake projects and the different parts of them and why each one is critical. But why is this part really important, and what does it do for the city as far as operational and capital costs for the pumps and other pieces related to it? Not specific numbers, but high level.
So I don't have, I wouldn't have a handle on dollars and cents and what the implication this would have for maintenance. But the key component of installing the deflector spur is to increase the water velocity or the water speed that flows past our intake structure, where we actually draw the city's raw water. Within the river, there's sand, there's sediment that is continually being washed down, being picked up and swirled within the river. And that is being drawn into our intake every time we operate that pump. In high sediment times, that pump or that line can become blocked or obstructed, at which time we need to shut our systems down, push water back out or back flush it to try to push that sediment out. The water team has been successful in doing that on a routine basis, but there is that opportunity where that line could become so plugged or inundated with sediment that we cannot simply just backflush, where they would have to completely shut the system down, vac it out, steam, or not steam clean, but suck all the sand, the sediment, get the system going again. And with the reserves we have in the city, if that goes longer than, I believe, 5 days, we start running out of water coming from that. So it increases the velocity to push the sand and the scouring at that intake so that we're drawing cleaner water, and we have to do less backflushing or maintenance on our pumps and other infrastructure because of that sediment. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, and would that extend the useful life of a pump as well?
Absolutely, it would. The less fine sediment that you're putting through a pump, the bearings, the gears, the vanes on the pump, of course, take less wear and tear. So we should see, an incremental increase on the life cycle of those pieces of infrastructure as well.
And one last question. Generally speaking, is this spur cheaper than the pumps would be?
That's a tough question, but a very good question. So no, I do not believe the pumps would cost this much, but over the life cycle of that structure, and I will respond back to the mayor and council on the life cycle of that structure, it would definitely start to outweigh the pumps, the pipelines, the sludging or desludging of the raw water ponds. So all those need to be taken into account, not just the pumps themselves.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's the point of what I was trying to get at, even though it is very high level and those specific numbers likely aren't attainable. But, for the relatively not really high cost for the amount of life you get out of something like this, the reduction in operating costs and reduction in the capital costs of those other items that may need replacement at some point in the future, you're getting really good value for what you're paying for this. For how simple of a structure it really is, it's really helping us out in the long run with getting the water from the river into our system with minimal issues, or less issues rather. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any, I would look to council for direction on 8.5.4, River Intake Dam Construction Contractor Award. Councillor Fagin.
I move that council approve the award of the River Intake Dam construction contractor to Kitchen Contracting of HSN Alberta in the amount of $1,267,295, excluding GST, plus a 15% contingency in the amount of $190,094.25, excluding GST, to be allocated from the 2020 capital budget project number 2013602 and the Environmental Services capital reserve number 1-400-410-35140. In addition, that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents.
Thank you, Councillor. A seconder, Councillor Monroe. Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on the motion as presented? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. If I could impose on council, if we could have a motion for a 5-minute recess, I would appreciate it very much. Councillor Diachuk, seconded by Councillor Monroe. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. We'll Further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, everyone. Moving on to agenda item number 9, bylaws. I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 9.1, bylaw number 20-2020, election bylaw, I'll ask the city clerk, Doug Rodwell, to present.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. The item I have before you is was discussed earlier in this meeting, and it's simply that we are looking for Council to grant the second and third reading to bylaw 20-2020, the election bylaw. The next municipal election will be held on Monday, November 9th, 2020. All elections within the City of Lloydminster follow the Local Government Elections Act 2015, Section 9.1. And the Act states the Council may pass a bylaw providing the use of voting machines during elections. The election bylaw includes the addition of mail-in ballots being permitted for the municipal election. This allows all electors still able to vote if they are away from the city during advanced polls or election day. The bylaw was given its first reading on June 22nd, 2020 at the regular council meeting with no changes being made to the document. Council may give its first and second readings as per the recommendation. Council may not approve the bylaw, and council may request further information. The alignment with strategic plan is that legislative compliance, having a bylaw to establish rules and procedures for the conduct of election, is alignment with the act. This bylaw will repeal the 2016 election bylaw 21-2016. And I must note that if council does not pass this bylaw today, the bylaw must be passed 90 days prior to the election date, and there would probably be a requirement for a special council meeting to do so before that date. And I'll pass it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, City Clerk. Questions or comments from council? One comment, thank you, City Clerk, for bringing this forward that I did not realize, and I guess now that I'm sitting in the chair that I'm sitting in, that the city actually oversees the election of the public school board and the Catholic school board or separate school board election, and that's all handled by the city staff at one time. And as you had indicated earlier in today's meeting, that the school boards share some of the costs associated to the election, but I did not realize it was all in the hands of the city. So our city staff has additional duties, not just electing council and mayor. It is also ensuring that the election is held properly for the trustees of the school board. So I appreciate that. That was interesting information today. Any other comments? Councillor Monroe.
Oh, I was just going to make the motion if we're ready.
I would certainly entertain that motion without seeing any other comments. So I'll look to you. Go ahead.
That council grant the second reading to bylaw number 20-2020, the election bylaw.
Thank you. A seconder, Councillor Fagnan. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor of the second reading?
Thank you, Your Worship.
And I'll look to council. Councillor Monroe.
That council grant the third and final reading to bylaw number 20-2020, election bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Torreson, seconder. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the bylaw as proposed? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, council.
I will exit now.
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham, and I'll send you a text when we're done. Get you back in on 9.2. I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 9.2, bylaw number 21-2020, amendment to land use bylaw number 5-2016, roof signs. I'll ask once again Anthony Andre to present.
Good afternoon again, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Anthony.
The recommendation is that Council grant second and third reading to bylaw number 21-2020, being a bylaw to amend the text of land use bylaw number 5-2016 to include provisions for roof signs within some commercial districts and all industrial districts. Due to unique site characteristics in some cases, the opportunity for a typical sign, such as a freestanding sign or fascia sign, is not always possible, and some businesses would prefer, for that reason, to utilize a roof sign. Roof signs are currently listed as prohibited under section 4.20.22 of the land use bylaw, contrasting with several comparable municipalities within Alberta and Saskatchewan, where roof signs are allowed in many commercial and industrial districts. For these reasons, administration has prepared an amendment to the text of the land use bylaw as it pertains to roof signs in order to better align with best practices. The proposed bylaw amendment lists roof signs as a discretionary use in the highway corridor, commercial, service commercial, light industrial, medium industrial, and heavy industrial districts, and includes provisions regulating the size, height, illumination, location, and number of signs are regulated. This is consistent with those pertaining to other types of signs. Administration issued internal and external referrals, as well as advertised a public referral in the Meridian Source May 28th, June 4th, and June 11th, 2020 to solicit comment. The 21-day referral ended June 18th, 2020. No concerns were received pertaining to the bylaw. Council granted first reading to the bylaw on June 22nd. Since first reading, a provision prohibiting illumination of roof signs was amended to allow illumination at the discretion of the development officer. The land use bylaw provides illumination standards to mitigate negative impacts to neighboring properties as a general requirement for all signs. As the proposed amendment classifies all roof signs as discretionary, neighboring properties within a 30-meter radius will be notified of an application, and the development officer is able to apply additional development conditions on a case-by-case basis. Should the amendment be approved, any roof signs that were constructed after 2016 will be required to submit a development permit application and will be reviewed against the current regulations. Should they not comply with the regulations, the applicant will be required to remove the sign or exercise their option to appeal the decision to the SDAB, where a final decision will be rendered. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Questions or comments? Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Seeing as I never commented on this one before, last time this was in, I chose to declare pecuniary interest, although my perspective on that has changed, as it's not assigning or awarding, work particularly anywhere where I would directly benefit, nor my employer necessarily, because an individual would have to choose an engineer of their choice after that time. So I look at the world differently. I just want to say that at the start, but just generally speaking, one, I think that it's good that we're kind of putting some parameters around what's acceptable as far as roof signs, because having it prohibited within our bylaw, I don't think is the right answer. But having, some opportunity for roof signs to exist, but having some conditions upon which they can exist, I think is just good sound practice. So it's obvious that administration and planning saw this as a gap in what we had in our land use bylaw and thought, you know what, there should be an ability to do this. We just have to do it the right way. And really, this just provides guidance so that if someone does go to do it, that we provide them the opportunity to have a plan in place that does it the right way, that doesn't negatively impact the properties around them or motorists or anything like that. So I think it's best off to have some regulations around this so that everyone who is potentially impacted by the signs is protected to a certain extent by having the right way to get there. So in general, I'm just in favor of having this bylaw, because I think it makes a lot of sense that it's likely going to happen at some point. And we've even seen that when we didn't have a bylaw, it was happening to a certain extent. So having the rules around it, I think, is just best practice. So good work on identifying the gap and noting the best way to do it. And then now having a process and system in place to ensure that there's compliance in the future with it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Diachuk.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So two parts. One is that, and you've done it and split it out in here. So there's kind of two parts in here. One is the sign that's illuminated like a digital sign, and then two, the signs that are illuminated by lights that would highlight it, and certainly on one section that talks about the lighting and that would illuminate it and shouldn't be facing the road and whatnot. So I'm still kind of puzzled. I mean, by the signage, I guess the signage that would be on the fascia of a building potentially could be there, but not on a roof sign. And I'm trying to wrap my head around that, and I don't have a good answer. I guess out of this policy.
Well, we actually tried our best to try to have very similar regulations to roof signs as a fascia sign. There might be some differences, particularly when it comes to electronic messaging. And I think that's just a matter of where those types of signs are appropriate. They may be appropriate 4 or 5 meters up a wall, but possibly not 11 meters up on the roof of a building.
Okay, I mean, I don't, I guess I know that, if you go to Edmonton, you see signs that are up on the 30th floor, and they're high and they're digital and there's a whole bunch of them. And so I'm just trying to wrap my head around, I know what the policy is intending to do, and I'm still struggling with kind of balancing out how larger cities have those signs that are, wrapping around buildings, and there's words going up and down the buildings, and there's lighting of all kinds. And here we are saying that, but if it's on the roof, here are the limitations. And I'm going to go along with this and support it because I think we need to move this policy forward. But I just think at some point we're probably going to need to revisit this in some way when we start having, buildings that are 12, 14 stories high that may want to have signs on the top of them, that may want to have signs on the side of them that are digital and provide messaging. And I'm not sure this policy would allow them to be able to do that.
Good point, Councillor. Councillor Baker, did you have a comment?
Well, Your Worship, you got a straight wall sidewall 20 feet high, and you put a wall sign on it in the top 5 feet. Or you got a building 12 feet high and you put a roof sign on it. What's the worst or the best? There's buildings over in the Industrial Park with 22 foot sidewalls. And there's buildings over there with 16 foot and 12 foot sidewall. Like I'm a little bit like Councillor Michael, trying to say, what's the problem? The big issue was signage, and we had it with Lakeland College. It's in a residential area, lighted sign, shining in everybody's bedroom window. That was the concern. But in an industrial park, a lot of people think their signage is good, that are lighted up, because it adds some security at night, because there's some lights on in the area. But I just don't get the connection between the height of the building, how a roof sign or wall sign makes any difference. Just don't understand it.
Councillor Torres, I see you'd like to speak to this.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I know that's, it's not appropriate to play charades in the middle of a meeting, but I'm just picturing driving in a car and you have a certain height where you look up and you can just see it and your eyes are still relatively on the road. But if that sign's too high, you're looking up like this or like this. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's your vision on the road and your level of distraction, to me, is the reason why there's variances in these things and why you're saying that you can do it one way and you can't necessarily do it another, and that there's certain parameters. And it's to the same argument as these mega towers in Edmonton. There's likely something within there that it can be 15 meters off the ground, that sign, but it can't be 40 meters off the ground. Likely because you're going to crane your neck and look up at something to try and read it. But it can also be, 30 stories high and there's no issue because it's not something that's going to distract a driver. So anyway, that's kind of the practical sense, the way I would see how those things would work.
Councillor Baker?
Well, Your Worship, I just said industrial park with 22 foot sidewalls. I'm not talking about a residential area. I'm talking industrial park. Most people go home at supper time, but those that drive through it should be able to see the signage. They're not interfering with anybody. And in fact, a roof mounted sign is sometimes a lot safer than a wall mounted sign because it's hanging off the metal in the side of the building, where a roof topper is mounted on top of the roof trusses. So there's always the issues of what's the right and what's wrong. But at the same time, if you're driving around looking at the top of a building, maybe you could have seen it 2 blocks away if you had a been looking ahead because it was on the top of the building. But if it's 12 feet off the ground, you may not have seen the thing. We could go on with this argument all day.
Yep.
I'm with Councillor Dychuk. Is this a big issue? Yes, it is in residential areas. You betcha it is. But in industrial areas, is that a problem? You look at that map that you produced that came along with the package. That area, for example, I don't see that a big problem. You go and look at our hotels in town and tell me how high the signs are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I was thinking about the hotels myself, that they're on the front of the face, but they are quite high. There's no question about it from that perspective. So, and I think that I hear what Councillor Dychuk said, that we may need to revisit this over some time as our city changes. And I think that what we're trying to see administration's brought forward is something to get us started, and it may need to be reviewed and revised. Anthony, if I can ask you this, you had indicated we were kind of behind other communities. Did the bylaw that you proposed and bring forward, is it mimicking other communities, other cities that have brought similar bylaws forward?
Yeah, for the most part, it's pretty consistent with what the regulations are in most other cities. Some have chosen to continue prohibition, I suppose, on roof signs for whatever reason. But cities that have them, these are fairly common regulations.
Okay, so I appreciate that. Thank you. And I know that, again, sometimes we share bylaws and other people share bylaws. And if we've been able to adopt a bylaw that's basically meeting other communities' needs, should get us.
For sure.
Councillor Dychuk, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, in the absence of not having a bylaw, let's start with this. But I think, certainly I'm hoping this council and future councils will be open to, reviewing this. I guess certainly as we grow and the city grows and people may want to advertise more. But because I think, I don't think I'm the only person having difficulty around wrapping my head around this. But by the same token, I know that we need to have a bylaw in place to be able to at least discuss the question and have an appeal on it so that we can move forward. So it may not be the final place where we land on in 10 years from now, but we start here and at least have a place that we can start with and work with. And so I appreciate the work you've done, Anthony. And I just, like I said, I shared my questions and concerns, and I just, I think, again, we start here and go forward, and we should be open-minded enough going forward to see some exceptions or perhaps, other questions we may need to answer within this bylaw in the future.
Councillor Baker?
Why are we trying to create this bylaw? Has somebody been complaining? One person? I've lived here for 50 years and I've never heard. I've had one issue that I watched in 20 years of council. That was Lakeland College. One issue. Why are we even bringing this bylaw forward?
I'll look to administration.
Create more paper? We got a book full of bylaws now. People get tired of all these changes and they want some freedom to run their businesses. I don't understand what we're even doing this for. I haven't heard one solid reason why we would have banned rooftop in that zoning. I haven't heard one legitimate reason.
City Clerk?
Because somebody else is doing it. It's not good enough for me.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. City Clerk?
If I may, under the current land use bylaws, roof signs are prohibited. So therefore, we have some existing signage that would have to be removed if we did not bring this bylaw into effect at this time. And then we can deal with those signages. The bylaw will allow for us to ensure that those signs that exist that have not been permitted are inspected and properly can take a wind load and are safe to the public. And that's really our motivation for bringing it forward this time. It's a gap in our bylaws, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't have to ask a business to take a sign down when they already existed. And this way we could properly manage and allow them to continue and grow.
I guess if I may, Your Worship, if you got some businesses that are illegal, that's one thing. But we have an occupancy permit process. I know for a fact that you spent 3 months getting a sign permit in the city of Lloydminster. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, and I think that the concern about the illegal signs that are considered illegal today, to try and bring people into that perspective that everything is within as any other law, because we know that the best of intentions, I think you know this better than anyone else, Councillor Baker, that people started with the best of intentions and somebody started to go off the track, and without bringing it back somewhere along the lines with a bylaw to ensure safety, to ensure whatever compliance from the building code and other things like that.
Absolutely, the safety.
Yeah.
The sign companies in this city, I think, know what the sign bylaws are. If they don't, how do they get a business license?
Well, that's that could be debated on its own merit sometimes.
Yeah.
Different perspective. Executive Manager Stang, I believe you had a comment.
Yeah, I think in this case the change is driven by an applicant who's looking to do a roof signage, and upon review of our bylaw, it was determined that they are not compliant, although we have multiple roof signs around the city. So we looked at what other municipalities do. We looked at what best practices are, and what we're bringing forward is administration's recommendation to allow them under certain conditions. Obviously, it's councillors' purview to determine whether they want to approve that amendment, text amendment or not, but it was driven from an application that the city administration has been dealing with.
Your worship, and then I'll be done. Thank you, Don. I didn't know what you just told me. If that had been in the report, we had a bunch of illegal signs and we want to make them legal, I wouldn't even be talking about this. But
yeah, I want to be careful. I'm not saying we have a bunch of illegal signs. There are roof signs that may or may not have been put up under a past bylaw or not. So
I understand what you're saying.
I'm trying to tiptoe around that, your worship, but we do have some instances we need to take care of.
Now I know why you want to do this. Thank you.
You're welcome, Councillor Baker. Councillor Thorson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, from everything I've heard, I think everyone agrees that we need some sort of parameters to operate around to allow the signs on the roofs. It's just the question of whether we all agree on the specifics. But like Councillor Diachuk said, we could put this in now, and when a development comes in that is a variance from that, we can look at whether or not that variance makes sense, and then there'll be an adjustment to the bylaw. But as far as we know right now, from what we've seen, these appear to be best practices, but scenarios may come up in the future that push this in a different direction. As far as specific parameters go.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll look for direction from Council on 9.2, the bylaw number 21-2020 amendment. Councillor Diachuk.
Move that Council grant second reading to bylaw 21-20. Oh, wait a minute, am I the right one? Yeah, I'm the right one. 21-2020 being a bylaw to amend the text of land use bylaw number 5-2016 to include provisions for roof signs within some commercial districts and all industrial districts.
Seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Councillor Diachuk, if you would, please.
Yep. Pardon me. I'll move the Council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 21-2020, being a bylaw to amend the text of land use bylaw number 5-2016 to include provisions for roof signs in some commercial districts and all industrial districts.
Seconder? Councillor Monroe gets it on this one. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. And we'll get Councillor Buckingham back in. Thank you very much. And that was carried. Moving on to 9.3, and we'll just give Councillor Buckingham a second here to rejoin the meeting. There he is. All right, City Manager, moving on to 9.3.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 9.3, bylaw number 22-2020, the library bylaw, I will ask Joelle Turcotte to present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship.
Good afternoon, Joel.
So recommendation that council grant second reading to bylaw number 2020 or 22-2020, the library bylaw, and that council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 2020-2020, the library bylaw. Background: the Lloydminster Public Library Board and City of Lloydminster Administration have been working collaboratively to come up with a governance model that will be of benefit to the Lloydminster Public Library and its patrons now and into the future. At the April 20th, 2020 regular council meeting, council directed administration to bring forward a bylaw to establish the Lloydminster Library Board pursuant to the Libraries Act, Alberta Act. Since first reading from bylaw number 2020-22, -2020 library bylaw at the June 22nd regular council meeting, 2 amendments to the bylaw occurred as follows. We removed 5.1.1. The city manager or delegate is hereby appointed as a city liaison for the library board, and the city position may attend the board meetings as a non-voting member and shall be provided all meeting documentation as board members would. And in its place, we added 5.9. The city manager or delegate is hereby appointed as a city liaison for the library board, and the city position may attend the board meetings as a non-voting attendee and shall be provided all meeting documentations that board members would. Again, previous in 9.2, the library board shall 9.2.1 keep accounts of receipts, payments, credits, and liabilities. 9.2.2 have a person who is not a member of the library board and whose qualification are satisfactory to council review the accounts each calendar year and prepare financial reports to a form satisfactory to council and submit the financial. And 9.2.2 submit the financial reports to council immediately after completion. Update: the library board shall 9.2.1 keep accounts of its receipts, payments, credits, and liabilities. 9.2.2 retain an accredited auditor that meets the requirements of the Act, conduct an annual audit. The auditors retained by the board must be independent and follow general accepted auditing practices. And 9.2.3 submit the audited financial statement to the city manager or delegate in a reasonable time frame after its completion. Options: that council approve all motions as indicated in the recommendations above. Second, that council not approve bylaw number 2020 library bylaw. 3, that council request further information and that the items be brought forward to a future regular council meeting for decision. Alignment with strategic plan. The item is alignment with the following strategic area: public library and legislative compliance, encourage a strong, supportive relationship between the Lloydminster Library Board and the City of Lloydminster that recognizes and prioritizes public library services. Bylaw 2020 was reviewed by legal and governance implication. Pursuant to Libraries Act Alberta, the establishment of the library bylaw forms the legal infrastructure for the provisions of library services at the municipal level and allows for the City of Lloydminster and the Lloydminster Library Board to cooperate, collaborate, and enter agreements of service. I'll leave it with you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Joel. Questions or comments for City Administration? Joel, the 2 changes that were proposed are simply that was just some cleaning up of wording more than anything, I take it, because I read through them and nothing changed. They kind of changed where they were in the spot for the first addition or a change, and the second one was simply a wording change.
Absolutely, Your Worship. I believe the first change was suggested by the library board, and the second one was through our financial team.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? This is a long time in coming. Thank you very much, Joel, for working through this. This is, I think that our library will feel much better knowing where they stand in the city and having a bylaw in place to enact it. So we have some other work being done in the library, and I'm looking forward to those updates. I'm sure the rest of council and the community are as well. But thank you for this. Final call. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll entertain direction from council on 9.3 bylaw number 22-2020, the library bylaw. Councillor Monroe.
That council grants second reading to bylaw number 22-2020, the library bylaw.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Buckingham, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on the bylaw as proposed? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Councillor Monroe.
That council grant third and final reading bylaw number 22-2020, the library bylaw.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Torres, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on the final reading of the bylaw? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Joelle. Moving on to 9.4, City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 9.4, bylaw number 23-2020, the Code of Conduct bylaw, I'll ask Chelsea Legacy from Ledge Services to present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Chelsea.
I'm here to present the draft Code of Conduct bylaw for first reading. Our issue is that the current Code of Conduct bylaw has not been updated since 2016. The Code of Conduct bylaw and policy were up for review as part of the governance document schedule. Administration has determined the need to combine both governance documents into one easily referenced document. The Code of Conduct bylaw now outlines all details regarding the Code of Conduct for members of council. No major changes were made to the bylaw. Changes to the bylaw have included formatting and housekeeping changes, along with the additions from the policy that were missing. Making these changes will assist with clarity and quick reference. I did just want to mention, administration did make the adjustment to the error found by Councillor Buckingham last meeting. Under section 12, gifts and benefits of the code, the dollar amount has since been changed from the $750 down to the $150. Our alignment with the strategic plan. This item is in alignment with open and responsive government, ensuring that members of council are aware of their expected conduct, and ensuring an up-to-date document will assist in process when issues may arise. Legal review has been previously done with no concerns identified. And governance implications, bylaw 08-2016 will be repealed, along with policy number 010-2016. And I'll leave it for you for questions.
Thank you, Chelsea. Questions or comments? Councillor Baker.
Your Worship, as you recall, we had quite a debate on this during the GPC meeting, and I'll leave that alone. But one question I have is, what's the issue of telephone and texting and use of phones during council meetings talked about?
Is that dealt with, Chelsea, in this, or is it in procedure, or where is it covered?
I'll just see if the city clerk can potentially speak to that. I don't think that the Code of Conduct speaks to it, but I'll double check.
City clerk?
I would have to confirm, but I believe it's contained in the procedure bylaw.
In the procedure bylaw?
I'm sorry?
In the procedure bylaw, Councillor Baker?
Procedure, thank you.
Yeah.
I believe so. I will confirm that for council.
Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding the first reading of the Code of Conduct bylaw? So both of these bylaws, the next two bylaws, will be coming back to council in sometime before the election.
Correct, yes.
Any further questions? Well, I will look to council for direction on 9.4, bylaw number 23-2020, Code of Conduct bylaw, first reading. Councillor Diachuk.
Hey.
Oh, did you have your hand up?
No,
sorry.
No, I'm ready to go. So move that council grant first reading to bylaw 23-2020, the Code of Conduct bylaw.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Monroe. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 9.5 through the city manager to Chelsea to continue on.
I'm here to present the draft procedure bylaw number 24-2020. Our recommendation is that council grant first reading. The procedure bylaw has not been updated since 2017 and requires some minor amendments. The procedure bylaw is the foundational governance document for members of council. The administration has completed a full review of the bylaw and has made the necessary changes to ensure ease of reference and clarity for members of the public, council, and administration. Administration's proposed changes are reorganization of the organizational meetings. Rather than holding a yearly organizational meeting, the city will continue to approve the organizational items in December of every year at a regular council meeting. This change provides clarity that the organizational items can be approved during a regular council meeting rather than a separate meeting and meets the legislative requirements of the Lloydminster Charter. The removal of consent agendas. Since the implementation of GPC meetings for information sharing purposes, there is no longer a need for consent agendas. The removal of proclamations and flag raisings. This is removed from the bylaw simply because we now have a policy that covers it, and the process for those are outlined within the policy. And reorganization of sections and housekeeping and formatting amendments. Administration split out in-camera into its own section to assist with clarity and quick reference for in-camera meetings. Moved additions to the agenda section into the agenda section rather than a section of its own. Point of order and point of privilege was moved into its own section. Removed meetings to be public section. All exceptions and meeting expectations are now included within the specific meeting type sections, such as regular council meetings are in camera. Meeting types, requirements, guidelines, rules, and expectations have been broken out into their own sections for ease of reference. And just simple adjustments to numbering and alignment have been made to ensure consistency with all of our other bylaw templates. The draft procedure bylaw was brought forward to the June 13th GPC meeting and received no additional recommended amendments. This item is in alignment with open and responsive government. Providing an up-to-date procedure bylaw is important to ensure decisions are made in accordance with applicable regulations and that the public can be able to reference the document to obtain information in a quick and easily understandable manner. Legal has reviewed this with no concerns identified, and this new procedure bylaw will repeal bylaw 14-2017, the procedure bylaw. And I will open it up for questions.
Thank you, Chelsea. Questions or comments, City Clerk?
Just for clarity, we've done a quick search of the bylaw, and Councillor Baker's question on the cell phones during council meeting is not encased in there. We're looking through the policy right now. I just can't recall exactly where it is, and I will get that information to council.
Thank you, City Clerk. So Chelsea, after George Cuff's review completed some time ago, that spurred some of this as well for our procedure bylaw. We're catching up to what we have been practicing. Is that what I'm seeing, basically?
Absolutely. Throughout the last few months, we've identified a few things just to keep it more clear and easily referenced for us as well as yourselves and the public. And with the Cuff report, that identified the need for the GPC meetings, which, judging by the last meeting, council still feels is very important to continue with. So yes, it's just to kind of build on what council and administration has been working on over the last couple of years.
Thank you. Councillor Baker, a comment?
Really was back to the question about the phones. Are you going to get back to us on that, Mr. City Clerk?
Absolutely, Councillor.
Is it an issue or isn't it? Or we've got two more. We got how many more readings? Two more readings?
Two more readings, Councillor.
Well,
two more readings.
Go ahead, City Clerk.
This would be the first reading of both bylaws.
Yeah.
The use of cell phones, I believe, potentially could be covered within the ethical governance policy in regards to the lobbying of elected officials, as well as in other areas. If not, if it's not clearly covered there, then we can certainly add it into one of these bylaws as well.
Thank you, City Clerk.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Councillor. Councillor Buckingham.
Thanks, Your Worship. I know we're going off topic here a little bit. Sorry, Chelsea. The cell phone thing. I use my cell phone in a council meeting quite often to have a second set of agenda documents and so on and so forth. I've used it as a calculator, that kind of thing. So as we're reviewing this stuff, I'd be curious to know where that falls to make sure I'm staying within the lines of what we're supposed to do. Because you can look back and clearly see that I've been on it once in a while, and that's the reason for it. So I think there needs to be some allowance for that kind of thing, just as we're looking at it.
Good point, Councillor Buckingham. I've texted you twice today in this meeting. And again, this is unique. This is not in a traditional council chamber setting that we're used to, where administration would find you in the council room adjacent to City Hall or at City Hall. But yeah, it's just some clarity for the council of the day, as well as anyone considering council, running for council in the fall, so they understand clearly that there is what the decorum is and the proper process and procedure. And thank you, Councillor Baker, for bringing that up. I think that just clarifies it for electronics, because it is a change. We're working on electronics, but in the same token, at what point are electronics beneficial to council when they're not? So we'll get some clarity on that from the city clerk here in the next little while. Any other comments regarding the proposed procedures bylaw? Councillor Diachuk.
Yeah, not to buy it, but just the phone thing, Your Worship, I guess. I think, sometimes it's best stated as to what's expected. And, summers in there on the role of council is that they're expected to be engaged and present in the meetings to contribute actively. And if you're on your cell phone and texting and doing other stuff, obviously you're not engaged and present and doing what you're supposed to be doing. So it can be structured in a lot of different ways. I mean, I thought of you as well, Councillor Buckingham, not so much from what you suggested, but you're also a fireman. So, and then from time to time, I know I'm expecting calls from my family members, because some of them are at a doctor's office or they're doing things or I expect a call. So is it the exception or the norm? And I'm hoping that, I guess, people see that from time to time it's the exception and not the norm. If it's the norm where you're engaged on your phone and not engaged in the council business, obviously that's an issue, and that's a responsibility of the chair and the mayor to have a chat with us and remind us why we're there.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any, I'll look for direction on 9.5 bylaw number 24-2020 procedure bylaw first reading. Councillor Buckingham.
Move the council grant first reading to bylaw number 24-2020, the procedure bylaw.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Torson. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the bylaw as presented for the first reading? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Carried. Moving on to item number 10. My mayor's report is attached for the council and public. It's been another month and a half of meetings by Skype, Zoom, and many other different procedures, just like today's council meeting. But certainly there's been a lot of discussion around the recovery, as well as the current events with COVID and what's been happening. So other than that, the public engagements, it was great to see some efforts from the Lloyd Exhibition Association working with Saskatchewan Health Authority to try and bring some semblance of a little different type fair to the city, which I appreciate. The graduation ceremonies that occurred, I think it was the ability for our high school graduates to walk across the stage and receive a diploma in a great fashion. And hats off to the parent committees, the volunteers that helped make that happen from that perspective. And other than that, that's basically been the summary for myself. Is there any other council reports that want to make note of anything that's happened in the last month or so? Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Along the same lines as in my role as Deputy Mayor last month, I got to fill in for His Worship at the Singing Over Our City event. And it was a really cool experience to be there and hang out and see everybody socially distanced in their vehicles and just kind of getting out and to see the smile on people's faces as the performers and poets and everybody did their thing on a Saturday night in the casino parking lot. It was really good. And my hat's off to the organizers for taking the initiative to plan an event like that, keep it within all the rules, and give people a reason to smile. It was an honor to bring greetings on behalf of the city to that event that night, and just the little things. You know, we go to these things and we don't expect anything in return. I got a card with a $5 Tim card, which I went to a drive-through and paid for the guy behind me. You know, just pay it forward, and it all comes from that event. So it was a lot of fun to be there, and thanks to everybody that was a part of that.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else have anything to report? Thank you. At this time, is there any other matters that this council needs to deal with? Not seeing any, I will look for inquiries from the media.
Oh, sorry, a little behind here for the video. Sorry about that. Today we have interview requests for yourself, Mayor Gerald Albers.
All right. I will ask for a motion to recess.
Motion to recess.
Motion to recess, Councillor Diachek, seconded by Councillor Buckingham. All in favor?
Thank you, Worship.
Carried. Thank you, everyone.